The story begins in a dark, shadowy realm. A grim figure holding a small girl questions why he is interfering. He considers eating her but decides against it, realizing that isn't his intention. Instead, he decides to simply observe her until a bad habit appears, allowing her to do as she pleases for now. As the girl opens her eyes, the shadowy figure remarks that this is truly an unexpected observation. The scene shifts to the year 998 on the Canary Highway, where the Imperial army is aggressively inspecting travelers. A man desperately claims he isn't smuggling food and has official permission, but the soldiers laugh it off, declaring they will confiscate his goods and inspect him thoroughly. They mockingly tell him to be grateful for their protection against bandits. Just then, a young woman with long white hair and a sword at her hip walks by. Captain Samuel, the guard supervisor, eyes her greedily, noting she would make a fine prize and that her sword would fetch a great price. He orders a new recruit to go inspect her as his first task. The recruit yells at the girl to stop, but she feigns terror, claiming she is too scared to move. The recruit scolds her for using such a harsh voice on a girl, prompting the white-haired traveler to ask if he can tell a man from a woman, as she sees no other girl around. When the flustered soldier points out the actual girl nearby, she casually admits she can tell that much, confusing him further. Captain Samuel steps in, grabbing her and asserting the Empire's control over the area. He mocks her for not having lower-ranked knights to help her. The girl calmly identifies him as an Empire soldier and complains that everyone wears generic armor, making it hard to tell them apart without a guidebook. Samuel finds her audacity amusing and courageous, stopping his subordinate from retaliating. He tries to charm her by offering an escort due to dangerous beasts prowling the area, while subtly threatening her with the sword on her hip. The girl politely declines the escort, stating she desires to become a soldier of the Furnace Kingdom and is heading to the royal capital. When asked if she will be left alone, she sighs that the conversation is tiring. Suddenly, she swings her sword, slashing Captain Samuel across the chest. As he screams about her insulting the Empire, she notes how bloody and painful it is for him. She casually tosses a dagger into another soldier with a heave-ho, remarking that this is why she asked to be left alone. She muses that human beings are truly war-like creatures and wonders if her words aren't getting through clearly because human language is so complicated. As the remaining soldiers charge, she effortlessly dodges and cuts them down. Asking if it is her turn now, she unleashes a flurry of strikes, leaving the ground littered with defeated soldiers. Samuel, terrified, calls her a monster and runs away screaming for his mommy. The girl stops him, stating she has no reason to kill him if he answers a question. She asks where he learned his swordsmanship, noting it isn't something a girl could easily learn. Samuel reveals it was taught to him by someone named Zed. The girl doesn't recognize the name but warns that saying it might annoy her. A shadowy voice echoes in her mind, confirming the name Zed and asking where he is. Samuel, trembling but trying to muster courage, wonders why he isn't running. He laughs maniacally, claiming it is rare to encounter a monster in a war and challenges her, asking if she means him by the word monster. Declaring it the first time he's heard such big talk, the story continues with the white-haired girl, Olivia, politely introducing herself amidst the carnage. Captain Samuel, barely clinging to life, sarcastically agrees to remember her name, questioning if a monster like her even counts as an ordinary girl. He declares that while he has never broken his personal rule against killing women, he is willing to make an exception for her. Samuel charges forward, screaming about his signature move, the violent thrust, aiming directly for her heart with the confidence of a man who has definitely never fought a protagonist before. He yells that he has her, but the thrust misses entirely. Instead, Samuel finds himself impaled, collapsing in a pool of blood. As he dies, Olivia tilts her head, wondering what he was trying to steal, having completely misheard his battle cry. The narrator notes that Samuel, known as Samuel of the Violent Thrust, was one of the most powerful knights in the Empire, which makes his defeat even more embarrassing for him. At the Earthbelt Empire military base, Fort Casper, Southern Field Army Commander-in-Chief General Oswan is shocked to hear that Captain Samuel was killed. Southern Field Army Staff Officer Alm Plain reports that it wasn't the work of the kingdom's army, but a monstrous girl with a black sword. The surviving soldiers are reportedly too traumatized to hold a normal conversation, though the girl claimed she was headed to the capital because she wants to be a knight. General Oswan worries that the kingdom is resorting to using monsters. Suddenly, the second Prime Minister, Darms, a hooded figure with an unsettling grin, interrupts the briefing. Colonel Paris tries to dismiss him, claiming the eyewitnesses are confused, but Darms ignores the dismissal to ask specifically about the black sword's features. Paris, sweating profusely, nervously replies that he only heard it was a black sword. D'Armes accepts this and leaves, thanking them for their time despite the lateness. As the Prime Minister departs, General Oswan notes how ghastly pale Paris looks. Oswan decides that if the information about the monstrous girl is true, they must send out spies to gather intelligence. As they talk, a shadow is seen moving independently like a living creature, and a hand is shown picking up a small object from the floor. Colonel Paris realizes with horror that for a moment, Prime Minister D'Armes' shadow moved on its own. Meanwhile, Olivia is skipping down the road, humming happily. She muses that humans are a cruel, warlike race that have a tendency to hunt the heads of their opponents to boast of their bravery and please their allies. She recalls Zed's advice that humans rejoice over their enemies' heads. She concludes that even if she isn't happy taking heads, the kingdom will surely be happy if she gives them the heads, so she decides to hire herself out as a volunteer soldier. She spots a massive structure in the distance and exclaims at its size. Recognizing the kingdom's coat of arms, a silver goblet with a gold and silver lion, she realizes she has arrived at the kingdom's military fortress. Flashback to a young Olivia pondering Zed's words that she was a living being called a human, though she found the concept of the third type of intelligent life to be full of difficult words. The shadowy figure known as Zed, whom the world's humans called the God of Death, clarified that he was not a human. Olivia recalled reading in a book Zed gave her about a terrible existence that indiscriminately harvested human souls, asking if that described her. Zed explained that they only reap souls from people who haven't developed a self, specifically dead humans. When Olivia asked if he would reap her soul too, Zed told her it was too late because she already had a self. Realizing the book was lying, the scene shifted to their home, a deserted temple in the middle of the forest known as the Gate of the Underworld, where Zed had found Olivia as a baby. Young Olivia was shown training with wooden swords. Zed critiqued her, noting that while she had no problems with agility, her movements were too direct and she was getting too absorbed in them. Zed stayed by her side during what he called observation, which encompassed both training and study time. During these sessions, Zed taught her a variety of essential life skills, including ways to catch prey, how to cook them, the continent's condition, language, magic, and strategy. Olivia questioned why she was training in sword fighting in hand-to-hand combat if there were no other people in the temple to kill besides her. Zed simply laughed and told her she would understand one day. Many seasons passed. One day, 15 years later, Olivia finally succeeded in cooking a meal without wrecking the stove, having mastered the output of her fireball magic. She called out for Zed, noting he was awfully late, but Zed suddenly disappeared. He left behind a letter, a brilliant red jewel, and a jet black sword shrouded in dark mist. The narrative then shifted to the broader world. In the lunar calendar year 995, the Earthbelt Empire's Emperor Ramuza II declared the unification of Duviderica, ending a 40-year peaceful era. The Empire sent a large army against the country bordering the Furnace Kingdom to the east, sparking a war that quickly engulfed the continent. By year 997, the balance of power collapsed as the Empire succeeded in taking the near-impregnable Fort Keel, turning surrounding countries into tributary states. The Empire then set its sights on the Furnace Kingdom's absolute line of defense, Fort Gaul, knowing the kingdom was tumbling down a cliff. At Fort Gaul, Private Ashton Zenefielder sat in the mess hall, depressed. He had heard that the commander received orders from the king personally to be prepared to defend to the last, realizing the place was essentially a graveyard. Ashton lamented that despite being exempted from conscription due to good grades at a prestigious school, that right was stripped away, and he was now confident he was going to lose his life. Suddenly, a girl of unparalleled beauty appeared in the grim mess hall. Ashton wondered what she was doing there as she ate bread. She offered him her bread, asking if he wanted it, but then seemingly received his instead, thanking him profusely and declaring him a good human. Ashton was confused when she exclaimed that the bread was delicious, as he felt it was rude to say so when someone was eating so voraciously, noting that the bread there was honestly not that good compared to his mom's cooking. Olivia explained that it was the first time she had ever eaten bread, describing the outside as crispy and the inside as soft and squishy. She mentioned she had read about it in books and always wanted to try it. Ashton wondered if she was serious or messing with him, assuming any countryside village had bread, and asked where she was from. Olivia replied that she was from the temple deep in the forest called the Gate of the Underworld. Ashton had never heard of it, but Olivia decided it didn't matter. She thanked him for the bread, and they introduced themselves. He was Ashton, and she was Olivia. She promised to see him again if they got the chance. Just then, a soldier named Maurice interrupted Ashton, asking if he knew what kind of person that girl was. Maurice recalled a top-secret story about a volunteer soldier who recently arrived with a bag stuffed with Imperial soldiers' heads as souvenirs. Ashton realized with horror that the story actually happened. The scene flashed to Olivia, covered in blood and holding a bag of heads, identified as the rumored head-hunting volunteer soldier, Warrant Officer Olivia. Ashton was shocked that the lady he just talked to was a warrant officer, a rare rank for a volunteer. Maurice asked what they talked about, and Ashton mentioned the temple. Maurice speculated she might be a mage from the St. Illuminatus Church, the major religion worshipping the goddess Sidoresia. Ashton found it unexpected, believing magic didn't exist, but Maurice explained that while magic was said to be lost in ancient times, those who live in temples and strike fear with their names are called mages. Ashton concluded the church wasn't involved, and Maurice remarked that it was a very interesting conversation before leaving. At Fort Gaul under a heavy downpour, a figure leaps down from a tree, revealed to be Intelligence Unit Mirage, Second Lieutenant Zenon, who greets Sergeant Maurice. Maurice skips the formalities and reports that the kingdom's army hasn't made any obvious movements, seemingly just clinging to the fort to defend it strongly. When Zenon asks for numbers, Maurice estimates around 40,000 soldiers. Zenon commends the good work, but Maurice hesitates, mentioning one worrying thing: a girl who brought a bunch of Imperial soldier heads volunteered. Zenon is stunned when Maurice reveals this girl was the one who killed Captain Samuel. Maurice asks if she has silver hair, and upon Zenon's confirmation, the mystery of her sudden promotion to warrant officer is solved. Maurice recalls Ashton mentioning a girl who lived in a temple, leading him to fear she might be a mage. Zenon groans at the thought of fighting a mage, realizing they are in serious trouble if the stories are true. Suddenly, Olivia appears out of the rain, casually stating she isn't a mage though. Zenon and Maurice are shocked by her sudden appearance. Olivia cheerfully asks what they are doing out on a rainy day like this. Zenon immediately attacks, but Olivia simply greets them. Zenon confirms she is the silver-haired girl, while Olivia asks if they are doing night training and worries if they will catch a cold. Zenon lunges with a knife, impressed that she can completely dodge his attack, but Olivia continues to evade him effortlessly. Zenon thinks he has her, but she slips away again. In a flash, Zenon is slashed across the chest, crying out that it's impossible. Maurice watches in horror as Olivia remarks that Zed taught her a lot too, though she notes that overall, Zenon was too slow. She admits she enjoyed the little spar a bit. She then tells Maurice she likes the rain, asking if he doesn't think it's wonderful. She points out that even if blood splatters all over him, the rain will rinse it off and he'll be all clean again. Terrified by this logic, Maurice turns and runs away, only to trip and fall flat on his face. Olivia apologizes, explaining that he ran away so suddenly she cut his legs off without thinking. She holds up his severed legs, offering to give them back for now. Maurice, staring at his own limbs, realizes the truth: she heard them talking earlier, so she knew he was a spy from the beginning. Olivia salutes cheerfully, declaring she is taking him as a prisoner of war. She asks Maurice if she is exactly like a soldier now, but Maurice has already fainted from the shock. Fort Gallia. Soldiers stare in horror as Olivia strolls into the southern headquarters, carrying a severed head in one hand and the legless body of Maurice in the other. Inside the interrogation room, Lieutenant Colonel Otto sits with General Paul, reviewing the testimony of the now critical spy. Otto confirms that Olivia successfully dealt with the man. Olivia cheers that the ordeal is finally over, complaining about how many times she had to repeat herself. Otto scolds her for her lack of manners, which she loudly acknowledges. When asked how she identified the spy, Olivia explains she was out for a walk because she loves the rain, conveniently forgetting that going out at night was prohibited. She describes spotting Maurice scurrying like a rat, following him, and eavesdropping on his conversation with another person to confirm he was a spy. Otto decides to let the curfew violation slide this time, but warns her not to break the rules again. He offers her a reward, and Olivia immediately asks for delicious bread from the capital. Otto is baffled by the request. Olivia explains that Ashton told her the capital's bread is the best, describing the crispy outside and soft, sticky inside with sparkling eyes. Otto tries to ask who Ashton is, but Olivia unhelpfully replies that Ashton is just Ashton and a human. Frustrated that his questions aren't getting through, Otto is interrupted by General Paul, who suggests cake is even better than bread. Olivia's eyes light up at the word cake. She hugs the general, calling him Grandpa Paul, and admits she has read about cake in books but never eaten it. General Paul is charmed by her enthusiasm, while Otto looks on annoyed. Paul asserts his authority as the one in charge of the fort and tells Otto to watch his language. Olivia playfully switches between formal and informal address, calling him Your Excellency and then just Otto. Otto grumbles that she lacks common sense like a country girl, while Paul thinks she needs a proper education, though he admits she is cheerful and good-looking. Later, Otto confirms that the spy's body was indeed cut in half before interrogation. Wondering if Olivia truly possesses the strength to do such a thing, he considers assigning an abandoned operation to her. The scene shifts to the year 998. The kingdom has lost the power to fight back. King Alphonse Sam Garamond makes a difficult decision to send the First Army, led by the invincible veteran General Cornelius, to recapture Fort Keel. In the royal capital Fizz, officers discuss the king's absolute commands. They note that if the decision had been made a year earlier, the circumstances might be different, but now recapturing Fort Keel is the only point to the siege. At the Fort Letitia Strategy Conference Room, Lambert the Brave, the First Army's executive officer, suggests assaulting Fort Casper instead. He argues that while Fort Keel was seized quickly by the Empire and is now a stronghold, Fort Casper was treated as old and abandoned by the kingdom. Now, the Empire uses Casper as a base to demonstrate their prowess and attack Fort Gallia. In the meeting, Lambert outlines the numbers. The First Army has 25,000 troops and the 7th Army has 30,000, totaling 55,000 against Fort Casper's 50,000. He confidently claims they can finish any battle quickly. Colonel Nainhalt, the First Army's adjutant, observes that Lambert seems awfully relaxed despite the kingdom being on the brink of destruction, though he sarcastically respects Lambert's keen insights. General Cornelius points out that Paul was ordered to defend Fort Gallia, so the 7th Army won't move, asking if Lambert intelligently thought that out. Cornelius muses that Lambert was once praised as the invincible general, but age has caught up with him. Lambert proposes drawing a strong defensive line at Fort Gallia if they recapture Casper and asks if the 7th Army will cooperate in retaking Fort Keel. Nainhalt notes that the Empire has about 80,000 troops at Fort Keel, and with their vassals, the number approaches 140,000. He doubts they will get assistance from the 3rd and 4th Army. Cornelius states it is impossible to retake Fort Keel. Lambert slams his hands on the table, angry, asking if they really want to dig their own graves in front of Fort Keel, insisting the king understands the situation well. Cornelius dismisses the meeting, telling them to discuss the details between themselves while he informs His Majesty. Nainhalt asks permission to go to Fort Gallia as a liaison, citing a few things he is worried about. Nainhalt reflects that he didn't report certain details during the meeting as they weren't necessary, but he finds a specific report hard to believe, that the abominable Captain Samuel was butchered by a 15-year-old female volunteer soldier. Meanwhile, in Lieutenant Colonel Otto's office, Olivia is late. Otto yells at her for being more than 30 minutes late. Olivia cheerfully declares the reason as clocks. She explains she doesn't have a splendid watch like Otto's adjutant, so she can't accurately tell time. Exasperated, Otto tells her not to make excuses and gives her his own pocket watch. Olivia is surprised and asks if she can have it. Otto tells her to be careful with her manners when talking to superiors. Olivia happily accepts the gift, calling it Adjutant Otto's pocket watch, and plays with it, opening and closing the lid with delight. Otto tells Olivia to keep the watch in her pocket, to which she cheerfully agrees. He then clears his throat and announces that he has a special duty for her. A text box explains that special duties are confidential, highly difficult tasks given to only a few. Otto notes that he specifically called her to say that this time, since they are out of time, she has to decide right now. Olivia salutes and declares that she won't refuse, citing military rules that make refusing special duties impossible. Otto thinks to himself that he knew she wouldn't refuse, just as he thought, and aloud he says that was well said. Otto points to a map on the wall where Fort Lambert is crossed out with the word Despuasale. He tells her that her assignment is to recapture Fort Lambert. Olivia asks if that is the fort that is crossed off. Otto confirms, explaining that 10 years ago they abandoned the fort. Olivia questions why they would recover it after throwing it away and marking it for disposal. Otto explains that manners, well, it is fine, but the situation is that the fort is now home to a group of bandits, and they want to take it back from them. Otto elaborates that the situation has changed a lot in the past 10 years. Their army has been backed into a corner against the Empire, and in order to defend against their invasion, they need to use Fort Lambert. He explains that in the past, they sent platoon-sized forces against the bandits living in Fort Lambert, but all of them were beaten and failed. According to the testimony of survivors, the majority were killed by a veteran bandit called the Long Spear Bearer. Otto thinks to himself that individually, she is likely the strongest in the 7th Army, and if he were to send her after him, she might be able to handle that Long Spear Bearer. Olivia smiles and asks to sum it up she is to go and kill all the bandits. Otto sweats nervously. He has a brief flash of a bloody massacre and thinks to himself about how humans love to see the heads of their enemies. Olivia asks if she needs their heads. Otto replies that well, simply said, that is it. Olivia acknowledges the order. Otto asks heads, and she confirms, saying yes, heads. A caption announces that the innocent yet wicked swordswoman is heading out for the sake of cake. Olivia salutes and declares she is heading out to recapture Fort Lambert as ordered. Otto tells her all right, he will be expecting good results, and that she may leave. As she turns to go, Otto thinks to himself that no, that is okay, and the heads are unnecessary. Olivia says yes sir and walks out. Otto stands alone in the office, looking exhausted, and suddenly realizes with a sweat drop that he should have asked when the cake is arriving, having forgotten to arrange the reward she wanted. Less than 3 days later, the special platoon led by Olivia marched onwards toward Fort Lambert, a fort overrun by bandits. While Olivia marched with boundless energy, claiming she wasn't tired at all, her subordinates were struggling. The group consisted of 20 greenhorns with only 2 months of experience and an unknown female commander. Given that the survival rate for new recruits during their first engagement was only 1 in 3, the soldiers were terrified they would meet their demise there. Olivia suddenly called for a short break, confusing the soldiers who were trying to keep up with her superhuman pace. One soldier, trying to save face, claimed he wasn't tired, but another finally snapped, yelling that they didn't have as much physical strength as she did. Olivia apologized, admitting she hadn't noticed their fatigue, because she wasn't tired herself. Ashton was internally relieved that someone had finally spoken up, thinking the soldier was a god for voicing their shared pain. Olivia realized she had been oblivious to their intentions, and when Ashton tried to claim he was looking out for their well-being, Olivia clarified that she just wanted to take a break for herself, leaving Ashton flustered that he couldn't take the moral high ground. During the break, Ashton enjoyed his black bread with mustard and dried meat, declaring it absolutely delicious. Olivia stared at him with intense, unblinking hunger. Ashton realized she had eaten all her rations and offered her some of his food. Olivia accepted gratefully, calling Ashton a kind person while worrying about what he would eat if a ferocious beast attacked. As she ate, Ashton worried about their remaining rations. Suddenly, a roar shook the forest. A horned lion, a beast notorious for being extremely ferocious and skillful with its huge horn, appeared before them. The soldiers panicked, screaming that it was an ugly unicorn and that they were done for. Ashton yelled for Olivia to escape because the beast was going to eat her. Olivia just laughed, calling Ashton a funny guy, and said it wasn't a big deal. As the beast charged, Olivia calmly dodged and thrust her black sword directly into its mouth, killing it instantly. The soldiers stared in shock, noting that her sword had been encased in a black fog. 3 days later, the soldiers treated Olivia like a goddess, offering her their dried meat in a congregation-like manner. Private Gel Striker noted the black fog around her sword. The soldiers tried to speak formally, but Olivia found the honorifics annoying. She reminded Ashton that he had spoken normally when they met in the canteen. Ashton, realizing she hadn't known he was her superior back then, forbade her from using honorifics. The soldiers began referring to her as a war goddess, though a small caption corrected that she wasn't actually a goddess. A soldier then asked why a black haze came out of her sword. Just then, they spotted Fort Lambert. Olivia ran ahead, borrowing a spear from a soldier and hurling it with precision to take out a bandit lookout instantly, shouting, "Jack, pot!" The soldiers noted that the bandits were oddly quiet for such a big castle. A man with long hair, the bandit leader, appeared on the wall, noting he had heard a sound. The soldiers wondered if he was a bandit, since he had been watching them. The leader remarked that the leader of the group was just a small woman. Olivia politely introduced herself, asking him to take care of her, which the leader found to be a very polite introduction. The bandit leader, introducing himself as Wolf, sat casually on the fort wall holding a long spear. He asked if they had come to take back the fort and demanded their reason for being there. Olivia's soldiers trembled in fear behind her. Olivia calmly explained that they came to take back the fort because it was their mission, though she admitted it was strange that the army abandoned the castle only to want it back now. Wolf laughed, acknowledging she had the gist of it. He then rudely asked if they would kindly turn around and head back home, complaining that it was a pain to get rid of corpses and pointing out that usually they were the ones disposing of bodies. Olivia smiled brightly and replied that it was troublesome to clean up separately, so they could just leave the bodies to everyone there, implying she would kill them all right there. Wolf was taken aback, asking if she seriously meant clean up in that way, and if she hadn't understood his threat, he declared that she was either very powerful or a damn fool, boasting that not a single person who talked to him like that had ever survived. Olivia realized with delight that this meant she was the first one. Wolf lunged forward with his spear, prompting Ashton to scream her name in panic. However, in the blink of an eye, Olivia closed the distance, pressing her sword right against Wolf's throat. Wolf sweated profusely, admitting that while a long spear was good for fighting at a distance, it was useless when the distance suddenly disappeared. Olivia cheerfully asked if that meant a sword was definitely the best. Wolf immediately surrendered, shouting that he got it and gave up, ordering his men to leave the fort. Olivia, however, said that was no good. Holding her jet black sword, she relayed her orders, stating that she didn't need his neck specifically, but she was told to kill everyone there. Ashton looked on in horror, realizing that this brutal order must have come from Otto. Before Wolf could react, Olivia thrust her sword through his mouth, killing him instantly. Blood sprayed everywhere as the soldiers watched in shock. Covered in blood, Olivia let out a sigh of relief, saying, "Phew, I guess." The remaining bandits stared in terror. Olivia remarked that she should quickly finish up the rest of them. If the bandits had originally planned to mince the kingdom soldiers, drink on top of their dead bodies with their comrades, and test out a new sword, feeling happy about the prospect. However, those plans were thoroughly ruined. Olivia walked through the carnage, asking if they were finished playing tag. A surviving bandit begged to be let go, screaming that he was begging her. Olivia looked at him and remarked that it was kind of lonely to return back alone, noting that this human was so lonely he was crying. She then struck him down. Olivia raised her sword high, her shadow reflecting the silhouette of death itself, and asked if they saw, stating that was just like she said. The soldiers watched in awe, commenting on how strong Commander Olivia was. They admitted it was amazing how she charged at that ugly unicorn and slaughtered it, and unbelievable how she dealt with the bandits when they were surrounded. They felt pathetic that they couldn't do anything but watch her while shaking, realizing they were truly pathetic. Deciding that it was their job to at least do that much, they resolved to ask her to train them so they could help her fight next time. The soldiers were shown practicing drills with wooden swords, splitting into attackers and defenders to see opponents' moves. They cheered for their captain and their Valkyrie, eating and drinking together. Olivia was seen happily eating a large piece of meat, declaring that their Valkyrie said so herself. Later, at the Royal Army stronghold Gallia in the commander's office, Olivia reported for duty right on time with 3 seconds left on the clock. Otto yelled at her to put away the watch. General Paul apologized for calling her there when she just returned, praising her for doing very well in her last duty. Olivia thanked him very much. Paul asked if she had trouble dealing with the skilled spear user amongst the mountain bandits. Olivia replied that he wasn't very good at it, while Ashton wondered if he was imitating a fish. A memory of Fort Lambert flashed by, showing Olivia fighting the bandit leader. Back in the present, Otto remarked that a skilled spear user bandit was nothing to her. Olivia admitted she didn't really remember the fight because everyone dropped dead after one attack, and she was having so much fun talking she almost forgot about it. Paul laughed and realized they died after just one swing. Paul then presented Olivia with a box of cakes, explaining that was the reason he called her there. Olivia was thrilled, asking if it was cake. Paul confirmed, and Olivia took a bite, exclaiming that it was as if the cake was saying it tasted super delicious and would melt her cheeks. She worried about what to do if it actually melted her cheeks, but decided to think about it when it happened, noting it was sweet and soft. Olivia then held out a cake to Otto, asking if he perhaps wanted to have a bite too. She clarified that unfortunately, she couldn't give him one because it was a gift from General Paul. Otto, furious, yelled at her, asking when the hell someone asked her for a cake and shouting that the officer room was not the place to eat cakes. Olivia recommended he see a doctor as soon as possible, noting there was no mistaking that this was the officer room and that humans sometimes lose memories when they get hit on their heads. She thought to herself that Colonel Otto also wanted to eat the cake, so if it was only one cake, she wouldn't mind sharing. Otto yelled again, asking if she was going to hit it after all. Olivia cheerfully said yes, sir, and that she would go to her own room to enjoy the cakes. Neinhardt commented that she was certainly an odd girl. Otto complained that she was just a rude girl with no manners or common sense. Neinhardt noted that she was totally different than he'd expected, having heard of her before. Otto realized that the person who killed Samuel was a girl like her, with silver hair and a black sword. He realized she took revenge for his best friend. Paul suggested that since she successfully took that fort, they could proceed with their plan if they recognized her skill and achievements. Otto complained that she spoiled her with the cakes. Nineheart told Otto not to say that, noting she was absorbed in eating her cupcakes right now. Paul argued that they had to use her to the best of their abilities to increase the success chance of the mission as much as possible. Otto grumbled that at the moment, she was the strongest pawn in the 7th platoon. Nineheart observed that Otto was a very realistic person who didn't make subjective evaluations of enemies or friends. Nineheart stated that the success of the operation lay in her hands, but they needed a competent lieutenant to work with her since he couldn't find anyone suitable yet. He said he had a suggestion and knew someone suitable for that position. Several days later at Kingdom Fort Gallia, a new girl arrived on the battlefield. Officer Claudia Young reported for duty to Colonel Otto. Otto noted she was the person Colonel Nineheart recommended. Claudia asked for the details regarding her sudden transfer from the 1st platoon to the 7th platoon. Otto explained that Chief Warrant Officer Claudia was being assigned as Olivia's vice commander. Claudia realized that Nineheart didn't tell her anything and that they were just pushing their job onto her. She muttered about Nineheart, her cousin, not even discussing it with her before deciding. As she left, she thought to herself that, to be honest, Olivia was a bit of a handful girl who had problems with her manners and common sense. Claudia leaves Colonel Otto's office, having been instructed to visit Warrant Officer Olivia in her room. Otto awkwardly asks her to forget his earlier comment about Olivia being cute, which he quickly apologizes for. Claudia checks her reflection, satisfied with her appearance, and proceeds to the room. Upon knocking, a voice from inside asks if that is Claudia. Claudia enters and formally introduces herself as Lieutenant Claudia Young, the newly assigned vice commander, noting that Colonel Otto had told her about Olivia. Inside, Claudia is stunned to find Olivia lounging on the floor surrounded by scattered books. Olivia casually introduces herself from her prone position, stating she will be in Claudia's care. Claudia is internally screaming about the lack of manners and common sense, wondering if this is a test. She notes the sheer volume of books in the room. Olivia explains that Ashton told her about something, and thanks to that, all her reward money from General Paul is already gone. She asked for books to be sent from the capital because books are expensive. Claudia realizes Olivia really likes books. When Claudia asks who Ashton is, Olivia unhelpfully replies that Ashton is Ashton, and he's a human, adding that Claudia sounds just like Colonel Otto. Claudia realizes Olivia is genuinely hard to handle and wasn't joking earlier. Olivia asks if her words are hard to understand, and when Claudia apologizes for asking something obvious, Olivia says she is glad that isn't the case. Olivia then dismisses her, saying the introduction is over and Claudia can leave. Claudia politely excuses herself, offering assistance if needed, and closes the door. Outside, Claudia angrily vows to make her cousin Nineheart pay for dumping this difficult assignment on her. Inside, Olivia reflects on Zed's teaching that knowledge is what separates humans from animals. She remembers how Zed made her read constantly in the temple. She recalls a time she tried to catch a she-fairy comet she read about, but lost control of her fire magic and destroyed the hearth. She had blamed the mischievous fairy, only to discover days later that Zed was the one secretly repairing the room with magic. Zed was the comet, all along. In the present, Olivia feels a pang of loneliness, realizing that while she is in the kingdom, Zed is not there and she wonders where he is. In the royal capital Fizz at Letitia Castle, King Alphonse Semgalman shouted furiously at General Cornelius. The king was outraged that Cornelius wanted to split the 7th platoon to attack Fort Casper while they were already tasked with protecting Fort Gallia, arguing that the platoon would be spread too thin. He ordered the 1st platoon to take down the fortress immediately instead. When Cornelius calmly stated that if the king would not listen to his words, he might as well quit the military since he was no longer useful to the kingdom. The king panicked. Realizing he couldn't afford to lose the unbeatable general, the king hastily gave permission for the 1st platoon to cooperate with the 7th platoon to capture Fort Casper. Following the king's order, the 7th platoon received commands to cross the Istishi River and advance along the Canary Road into enemy territory. At the Imperial southern base, Fort Casper, the commanders observed the kingdom's march, assuming they were aiming for Fort Casper. A commander noted that General Oswan's plan to attack Fort Gallia had been approved by the Emperor. Emperor Ramuza XIII, accompanied by the shadowy Prime Minister d'Armes, was informed of the situation. D'Armes advised the Emperor to simply observe the kingdom's movements for the time being. Inside the Imperial command, a commander praised the perfection of their plan. They discussed how the notorious Mad Samuel had been defeated by a young girl wanderer, which was hard to believe but true given the bigger picture didn't change much. They concluded there was no better time to attack Fort Gallia than now, with 50,000 men in high morale. General George, captain of the Armored Front Cavalry Squad, eagerly wanted to show the Empire's might. However, 2nd Lieutenant Zenon noted that he hadn't received any message from the spy he left in Fort Gallia, suspecting the spy had been captured or killed. Colonel Paris suggested they show their power to the 7th Squad. The Imperial commanders identified the Iris Plain as the perfect battlefield, located near Cross Valley and Ark Forest, and close to Fort Casper. They planned to unleash their armored cavalries on the 7th Platoon. Colonel Paris cautiously suggested requesting reinforcements from Fort Keel to be safe. General George exploded in rage, calling Paris a fool and a coward for suggesting reinforcements when they had overwhelming numbers. He shouted about the shame of needing help, prioritizing his reputation over the safety of his men. Paris internally noted George's vanity but apologized aloud. George quickly calmed down, dismissing Paris's strategic concern, and called for a toast. The next morning, all 50,000 Imperial soldiers from Fort Casper marched toward the Iris Plain, chanting loyalty to the Emperor. Meanwhile, a week prior, the kingdom had been secretly moving soldiers bit by bit into Lamberg Fort, garrisoning about 3,000 troops without the Imperials noticing. Olivia, now commander of the Special Squad of the United Army, led these 3,000 cavalries into the Ark Great Forest. Riding alongside Claudia, Olivia cheerfully told her vice commander that her tense face was a waste of her beauty. Claudia, flustered, replied that even a compliment sounded like a grudge coming from Olivia. Olivia innocently asked why, then complimented Claudia's riding skills on a horse famous for being hard to tame. Olivia explained that she had tried to ride the ugly unicorn, the horned lion, when she was a little girl, though it had been rampaging wildly. She contrasted it with horses, which she found very quiet. Claudia was horrified, realizing Olivia was talking about the disaster-level monster Type 2. Olivia mimicked the beast, calling it cute, and stood up on her horse to prove how docile animals could be. Claudia screamed at her to stop, reminding her that she was the commander of 3,000 men in the middle of a secret operation. Despite the chaos, Claudia observed Olivia's relaxed demeanor and convinced herself that this lack of nervousness was a calculated act to keep the soldiers calm before the decisive battle. The strategy was set. First, the unit would cross the Ark Great Forest to flank the Imperial soldiers in the Iris Plain. Then, they would join forces with the main squad clashing head-on with the enemy and charge together. This daring plan aimed to destroy the Imperials in one fell swoop, focusing entirely on the element of surprise. Warrant Officer Olivia's role was defined clearly. She was to take the enemy's head silently. Claudia's role was equally critical but vastly more stressful, as she was tasked with leading Olivia during her duty. Claudia sweated internally, reminding herself that the most important thing was balance. She tried to convince herself it would be all right and pondered why she was assigned this specific post. Moreover, the timing for that important charge had been given to her. But the pressure was immense. While Claudia was mentally spiraling about the heavy responsibility and forcing herself to maintain vigilance, Olivia completely shattered the serious atmosphere. She cheerfully asked if the guys were tired or wanted to take a rest. Then, riding her horse with a beaming smile as if they were on a picnic, she asked if the commander was already hungry, leaving Claudia to wonder how she was supposed to manage a commander who treated a surprise attack like a lunch break. The soldiers of the Special Squad reminisced about their time during the Fort Lambert recapture mission, noting how they could only stand there trembling back then. They felt stronger now after Commander Olivia's training, though Claudia thought they were being naive to think it would be easy. She believed they would be useful this time, but Olivia bluntly told them they would have to go through long and painful training to become strong. She pointed out that pointing out their weakness right before a battle would only discourage them. Olivia then teased Jael, telling him he wasn't as strong as he thought and should be careful not to get killed. When the soldiers reacted with shock, Olivia turned her attention to Ashton. She recalled hearing about him from the book incident and asked how weak he was. Ashton flustered, insisted he was giving his best effort. Olivia suggested that he looked more suited to be a strategist, noting he was strong when playing chess during breaks. This comment sent Ashton's morale soaring while his combat confidence plummeted. Meanwhile, the soldiers looked around alertly, which Olivia noted meant they didn't look like new soldiers anymore. She wondered if that was true, admitting she got kicked out of the castle before she could teach them much. As they rode, Olivia wondered what reward General Paul would give her once the mission was finished. Claudia watched her, seriously wondering who exactly she was and realizing she had talent in instructing too. At the Kingdom's army camp, commanders noted there was no movement around Fort Keel. The joint army of Paul and Lambert prepared as the enemy marched toward the Iris Plain with about 50,000 men. General Paul worried if the strategy led by a 15-year-old girl would be all right, thinking it would be pathetic to call for reinforcements in their first battle. Soldiers nearby gossiped about the beautiful girl who elegantly fights on the battlefield, calling her the War Maiden and the silver-haired War Maiden. Paul blushed intensely at the perfect nickname, acting like an old man boasting about his granddaughter, which the soldiers found bewildering. The Southern Empire Army led by General Oswan arrived at the Iris Plain to intercept the 7th Platoon. The King's army headed by General Paul arrived one day later. The battle formations were set with the Empire on one side and the Kingdom on the other. The battle was initiated by the armored cavalry charging in, marking the beginning of the Battle of Iris Plain. General George of the Empire mocked the Kingdom's army as too weak as they clashed. The Kingdom's forces appeared to retreat, and Vice Commander Silas reported this to George. George saw an opportunity to break their formation in the middle and aim straight for their head commander. He promised his proud armored cavalry soldiers that they could get anything they wanted if they got the enemy commander's head, leading a reckless charge. On the Kingdom's side, Neinhart identified the charging troops as their famous armored cavalry. Lambert asked if Neinhart had prepared something special for them. Neinhart, calm as ever, ordered the archers to fire at will. Flaming arrows rained down on the charging horses. The main goal wasn't to burn the enemy but to scare the horses, since no animal in the world doesn't fear fire. The horses panicked and reared up, throwing their riders and halting the charge. As time passed, the fighting calmed down bit by bit, with battles on the sides being less intense than the center. The first day ended in a draw as both sides blew their horns to signal retreat when the sun started to set. The Empire lost 2,000 men while the Kingdom lost 3,000. That night at the Kingdom's camp, Otto found Paul still working. Paul admitted he couldn't help but get excited during a battle. They discussed the losses and the strength of the armored cavalry. They noted that the 1st platoon used fire arrows to scare the horses, but worried that if rain fell, the fire arrows would lose their effectiveness. They also waited for the special squad to arrive. On the second day of the battle, since both sides were more careful about their central formation, the fighting in the center wasn't as intense as the first day, shifting the main battle to the sides. Lieutenant Elman of the Kingdom Army watched as the enemy forces began to retreat. His vice commander, Russ, eagerly suggested that they should chase them down immediately. Elman agreed that failing to pursue would raise suspicions, so he ordered the cavalries to move forward with about 400 men. However, he instructed them not to chase too far and to retreat as soon as the situation looked bad, muttering to himself that he was just talking to himself to calm his nerves. The entire strategy relied heavily on the element of surprise, a plan known only to a select few commanders. General Paul and Colonel Otto discussed the situation, noting that normally they wouldn't attack the enemy until the ambush was sprung. They had already told the individual commanders not to go too far. Since they were planning to capture Fort Casper, they wanted to keep their losses to a minimum. Paul felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. He realized that being too passive would disrupt the soldiers' morale, but he also had to skillfully hold the enemy attack while fighting with his full power, all without letting his own men or the enemy get suspicious. The stress gave him a massive headache, making him realize this was harder than he thought. His mind drifted back to when he met Warrant Officer Olivia by coincidence in the hallway at Fort Gallia. He remembered soldiers fawning over her, calling her the silver-haired War Maiden and marveling at her beauty and strength. Paul reflected on the fact that the key role in this entire battle was entrusted to that 15-year-old girl. He wondered what kind of face the enemy would make if they knew the truth. The battle on the Imperial Army's right wing descended into chaos under the command of Mintis Ora-Ix, a distant relative of the royal family. Mintis screamed at his subordinates for showing their faces, displaying the emotional stability of a spoiled child. Vice Commander Major Rayones watched in despair as Mintis ordered a pathetic strategy of sending only 500 men to scatter the enemy, resulting in a 70% loss rate. Terrified of being scolded by his father for a lack of achievements, Mintis demanded the cavalry be sent out again without any real strategy. Realizing that Major George was useless in this situation, Rayones decided to take matters into his own hands to save the situation and show off his ability. He ordered the 3,000 cavalrymen to be split into 3 squads to attack the center of the enemy formation. On the Kingdom side, Lieutenant Elman, leading the left wing, observed the persistent enemy attacks. He realized the enemy was doing the exact same thing as before and suspected a trap or a shift in strategy. Instead of falling for it, he ordered a withdrawal to reform the battle line, realizing the previous attack was merely bait. He pulled his archers back and brought heavy soldiers with spears to the front to fill the gaps. Meanwhile, Mintis, watching from afar, delusionally believed the kingdom army was panicking and celebrated his own strategic genius. Mintis declared he would take command of the whole army to eliminate the scattered soldiers personally. Rayos tried to object, noting that standard cavalrymen didn't have the power to do what the heavy armored cavalry could, but Mintis ignored him, desperate for an achievement. When Rayons tried to stop him, he was threatened with treason for disobeying a royal order. Mintis ordered the charge toward the main enemy army. As they charged, Rayons felt something was strange about how easily the enemy was reacting, but it was too late. He looked out and realized with horror that the enemy army was already surrounding them. Rayos realized they had completely lost the battle of trickery and fallen for a trap. He ordered a hasty retreat to minimize losses. Back at the Imperial camp, Mintis was busy celebrating a victory that didn't exist, drinking and laughing. Rayos arrived, shouting that the enemy was encircling them, but Mintis, clearly drunk or just delusional, offered him a drink and asked if he wanted to join the party. A soldier fell off his horse in panic, but Mintis thought they were just faking it. Rayus screamed that they had fallen for the trap. Another soldier tried to explain that the situation had turned for the worse, but Mintis threatened to cut his head off if he kept making jokes. The soldier finally screamed that their army was completely surrounded, and Mintis finally looked terrified as the enemy appeared right before them. Mintis blamed Rayons for the disaster. Rayons, accepting his fate, decided to make a stand to buy time for Mintis to escape, with his loyal men staying by his side. Elman observed that the enemy was taking the bait. He decided to leave an opening for them to escape rather than cutting off their route and forcing them to fight to the last man, which would cost too many of his own soldiers. He noted that the enemy's next strategy relied only on brute force, which was a huge letdown compared to their earlier charge. The battle ended on the second day with a total victory for the kingdom. The kingdom lost 2,000 men, while the Imperial army lost 5,000. Amidst all this bloodshed and strategy, the special team led by Olivia was still nowhere to be found, presumably still looking for a shortcut or a snack. The story resumes on the early morning of the fourth day. The third day of the battle had ended in an impasse, with only small skirmishes between the two armies, particularly on the Imperial army's right wing, where Mintis had done nothing but defend himself. General George laughed maniacally, declaring that the weather was finally working to their favor. A subordinate agreed, stating they were ready to charge in at any time. George rallied the pride of their nation, the armored cavalry squad, screaming orders for them to kill them all and leave no one alive. He commanded them to charge right to the enemy's center and head straight for the enemy's head. The soldiers cheered "yeah" in response, fully prepared for the assault. On the Kingdom Army's center, Lambert and Neinhardt stood in the rain. Lambert stated he knew the enemy was not planning on letting this chance slip away. Neinhardt asked if they were going to thin out the middle of the formation to lure the enemy in. Lambert confirmed that was right. He explained they would take the charge with a V formation. Neinhardt noted that the enemy was planning to force their way through to the center and go straight for the main army. He thought there was a good possibility based on the move they made on the first day. George, mounted on his horse, surmised that if that was true, he bet their head was a stubborn muscle brain. Lambert smiled and said there was no mistaking that he would take this bait. He admitted that after all, if it was him, he would do exactly the same, even if it was obviously a trap. Neinhardt internally realized Lambert was basically saying he was a feral beast too. He asked if Lambert was pretty confident. Lambert said but of course and mentioned he had one suggestion for this strategy. Neinhardt then remarked that he felt pathetic for thinking that, but was glad they were on the same side. He added that although Lambert looked handsome on the surface, he was quite the saddest. Lambert sweated profusely at the comment. Lambert then called Neinhardt really cheeky too, as expected of the vice commander of the first squad. Neinhardt said he felt extremely happy to hear his compliment. He said he was really thankful for all his kind words and asked Lambert to please leave the rest of the preparations to him. At the same time, in a different place, specifically hiding behind the bushes on the Imperial army's flank, Olivia and Claudia were watching the battle from afar with their telescopes. The hero always comes late. The rain poured down on the battlefield, marking that a few days had passed since the battle started. Claudia watched the scene, feeling the weight of their delay, but she steeled herself, deciding it was no time to mope around. Beside her, Olivia peered through a telescope, sweating profusely and wondering how she should beg for forgiveness for their failure to arrive on time. Claudia reassured her that it could not be helped and it was not her fault that the river was flooded and they could not cross. Through the lens, they saw that the kingdom army was getting pushed back. Olivia, strangely enough, seemed to admire how well trained the enemy looked, prompting Claudia to snap her out of it, reminding her that this was not the time for admiration. Claudia declared they had no time to lose and needed to ambush the main enemy army immediately. She noted that as far as she could tell from there, the main clash was happening in the center against the Imperial armored cavalry. Suddenly, Olivia turned and grabbed Claudia's face, laughing that her vice commander's face was all muddy. Claudia, shocked and covered in mud, blamed Olivia for it. Olivia told her to calm down, explaining that it was too soon to make a move, and they should watch the situation a bit longer. Claudia protested that their army was getting pushed back, but Olivia insisted she take another look at the center through the telescope. Claudia observed that their army had formed a V formation to receive the charging Imperial armored cavalry. Olivia pointed out the strangeness of it. Normally, one would thicken the center so that the charging cavalry would not be able to break through, but their army had spread the center thin. Claudia realized that normally the enemy armored cavalry should have the upper hand. The narration explained that the V formation was spread thin in the middle, aiming to surround the enemy. Claudia worried that if the enemy broke through the middle first before the sides could complete the encirclement, it would be the end for them. Olivia, however, smiled confidently, believing that they were doing that to set a trap for the Imperial soldiers, which meant they must have some kind of plan. Olivia reasoned that if the trap went well, it would at least shake the enemy soldiers, noting that it seemed to be the main fighting power of the Imperial army there. Claudia was confused about what kind of trap it could be, admitting she had no idea. Olivia stretched her arms and suggested they stop there for now. Claudia realized that if they could trick the enemy and ambush them, it was more likely to shake the Imperial army, noting that it was indeed hitting two birds with one stone. Claudia realized that her view had been getting narrower and narrower before she even realized it. She admitted that since they were given a very crucial job, she was too focused on what was going on in front of her and failed to see the bigger picture. Olivia was seen stretching nearby, looking relaxed. Claudia called out to Olivia, instructing her to leave some men on the vantage point so they could check immediately if the trap went well. To psych herself up for the stress of command, Claudia proceeded to smack her own cheeks repeatedly, making a loud slapping sound that probably hurt more than the enemy would. Claudia saluted and declared that she would leave it to her, while a small soldier in the background looked on in confusion, wondering what kind of leadership technique this was. Olivia told Claudia she would leave the rest to her, although she didn't understand why Claudia smacked her own cheeks. Olivia added that since they could use the chance when the enemy was shaken to set up another ambush, it was the right move. Claudia agreed. The scene shifted to the rain-swept battlefield where the Imperial armored cavalry was charging forward. General George led the charge with a fierce expression, looking like he hadn't had his coffee yet. His subordinate yelled at him to slow down, pointing out that the enemy's movements were rather suspicious. George ignored the warning and yelled at him to make it quick. Suddenly, a soldier was struck down. George's subordinate believed that they must be setting some kind of trap. He noted that the difference was as clear as day compared to the first day of the battle. For some reason, the enemy wasn't resisting much. George dismissed the concern with a hump, asking so what. He declared that if it was a trap, they would crush it. The subordinate was shocked, asking if he was saying that the proud Imperial armored cavalry could be defeated by a mere trap set by the kingdom army. George simply stated that was all there is to it, displaying the confidence of a man who clearly hadn't read the genre of the story he was in. George then told his subordinate to shut that mouth unless he gave permission. He told him to just think of taking down the enemy's main battalion. George rode off, saying he didn't have time to listen to foolish talk. He saw the enemy taking their bait as planned, calling it his greatest achievement right in front of his eyes. He charged towards a line of hay on the ground, completely unaware that he was riding straight into a barbecue. The commander confirmed that all their men had been withdrawn from the enemy's path. Satisfied that there would be no problem, he gave the order to do it. An archer holding a flaming arrow prepared and fired. The arrow flew through the rainy sky. The commander ordered to start the fire. The arrow struck a pile of hay soaked in oil that had been placed at a point they expected the enemy to pass through. General George looked on in shock as the fire ignited. The armored cavalrymen who didn't see it coming were engulfed in flames in an instant. The center of the battlefield became a sight of hell, and the smell of smoked meat enveloped the area, which was a bit too literal for a barbecue. On the other hand, on Olivia and Claudia's side, the mood was much lighter. Olivia cheered that the bread was delicious. A soldier reported in while Ashton warned someone in the background to watch their timing when pulling the bread away, or it would get eaten right away. Olivia happily munched on the bread, declaring that Ashton's bread was really delicious and the special mustard was just the best. Suddenly, Claudia spotted fire blazing in the center of the battlefield. Olivia calmly noted that it seemed to be a trap set by their side. Claudia realized it really turned out just as she had guessed. She ordered everyone to be told that they were heading out. A soldier saluted and agreed to do so right away. Claudia wondered what a daring strategy it was, questioning who exactly thought of using fire in the middle of the rain. Olivia stretched her arms cheerfully, betting that the enemy was focused on the central area. She concluded that thanks to that distraction, it would be easier for them to set up an ambush. The rain poured down heavily as Olivia watched the distant fires of the battlefield. A soldier called out to Lieutenant Olivia in surprise as she suddenly ran out into the downpour. She remarked that the rain was pretty heavy and decided that in that case, she would proceed. She mused that no matter how bloody the situation became, the rain would wash it all clean, a comforting thought for someone about to commit mass murder. Her soldiers looked on in terror, wondering why they were so scared of a little precipitation. Claudia yelled at her not to leave her behind like that, struggling to keep up with the monster girl's pace. Olivia and Claudia rode their horses forward, coming face to face with the Imperial Army's flank guard. Claudia nervously pointed out that the enemy had spotted them. Olivia cheerfully agreed that it seemed to be the case. She gripped her sword tightly, noting that although they had been spotted, it was already too late for the Imperials to do anything about it. With a bright smile, Olivia charged forward on her horse. She swung her black sword with terrifying grace, slicing through an enemy soldier and sending blood flying into the rainy air. She continued her rampage, cutting down more soldiers while sitting calmly on her horse, looking like a gardener pruning very bloody hedges. Her sword dripped with the evidence of her work as she rode through the chaos. This marked the first time Claudia was witnessing Lieutenant Olivia fight in person. She was finally seeing for herself how Lieutenant Olivia fought while soldiers around her cheered for their commander. Even after reading the reports about Olivia's fighting prowess, Claudia had thought nothing would surprise her. But now that she saw it for herself, the sheer power was just overwhelming. Olivia laughed cheerfully as she charged ahead alone, prompting Claudia to yell at her for rushing into danger out of the blue, to which Olivia simply apologized with a laugh. Claudia realized she needed to stop gawking and focus on the fight, noting that there were simply too many openings in the enemy lines for Olivia to ignore. Suddenly, a soldier shouted that another squad of enemies was approaching their commander. Claudia's expression turned serious as she assessed the new threat. She ordered the 3rd and 4th battalions to follow her, instructing Olivia to head straight for the enemy's main battalion as fast as she could while she held off the incoming threat. When Olivia asked if she was sure, Claudia confidently told her to leave it to her and that they would meet up later at the main battalion. With that, Olivia rode off into the woods, leaving Claudia to handle the cleanup. The Battle of Alm Plain was finally reaching its climax. Olivia, not wanting to lose to Claudia, decided they should head to the enemy's main battalion. But before that, she spotted a group of enemies nearby. With a bright smile, she suggested they make quick work of them first, charging straight into the fray with her sword ready to swing. The story continues with Olivia riding through the battlefield, effortlessly cutting down soldiers who recognize her as the monster girl from the Canary Highway incident. Rearguard Commanding Officer Major Brandt tries to rally his troops, shouting that they shouldn't be frightened by a single girl. But he charges at her and is instantly cut down. The soldiers scream that she really is a monster as they flee. Olivia orders her troops to kill them all, and she looks over the carnage, remarking to Zed that human beings are truly cruel and warmongering creatures. At the Kingdom Army main force, Otto and Lambert discuss the plan. They note that the special brigade led by Lieutenant Olivia is a bit late. They worry that if enemy reinforcements are dispatched from Fortress Keel, it will be over for them. But they decide to wait a bit longer for the signal fire. Otto knows Lambert is thinking about attacking now since the special brigade cannot help, but Lambert agrees that right now is an opportune time to attack, though he notes the enemy general is not a fool. Otto suggests the enemy may begin retreating back to Fort Casper after finding themselves at a disadvantage. Lambert implies that would be the perfect time to crush them. Otto mentions he said they were running late but trusts Lieutenant Olivia, and Lambert agrees that believing in subordinates is a duty of a commanding officer. At the Imperial Army main encampment, Lieutenant General George realizes he probably charged despite knowing it was a trap because he is brash. A subordinate suggests the Lieutenant General thought the kingdom troops wouldn't pose a problem. Suddenly, reports come in that enemy forces have appeared behind them. Paris is ordered to ascertain the situation immediately. Reports confirm the rear guard commanding officer met a cruel end, and that a single girl called a monster is likely the one who butchered Samuel. George realizes this battlefield is the stage for the confirmation of her existence. Paris tries to reassure George, saying not to worry about the monster, but suddenly a sword pierces through a soldier next to George. Soldiers scream about the monster. Olivia appears covered in blood and introduces herself as Olivia. She asks which human is the commander. Soldiers try to hide, but Olivia says hide and seek won't work and spins to cut down the surrounding soldiers. She looks at the remaining officers and says they don't look like the right ones, comparing them to Grandpa Paul, and decides they don't seem very important. Paris realizes he won't be able to buy the general much time and tells General Oswan to retreat immediately. Paris charges at Olivia but is quickly defeated, rolling on the ground and apologizing. Oswan looks at his fallen strategist and says he doesn't think he will be able to fulfill his last request. Oswan then introduces himself as the commander of the Imperial Southern Army, Oswan von Glarwen. He charges at Olivia and they clash swords. Oswan is shocked that she is really human and Olivia laughs, saying of course she is human. Oswan asks if they can end it now. Olivia asks if he will sheath his sword if she refuses. She realizes she was mistaken about her word usage and that human language is complicated, noting she never considered a situation where someone refuses. She grips her sword and says, okay, how about this? She will be ending him now. She swings, and Oswan braces himself, shouting, here I come. They clash again, and Olivia gets behind him. She tells Sir Oswan that he is pretty strong but just a little too slow. The sequence begins with a blur of motion as Olivia delivers a fatal strike. The enemy general's head separates from his body, flying through the air before he lets out a final ah. Claudia rushes over to Lieutenant Olivia, asking if she is injured. In a separate thought, the pitch, black fog shrouding the sword, and the shadow floating behind Prime Minister d'Armes are noted to be very similar. Claudia checks herself and declares she is all fine, admitting she sustained some wounds but insisting it won't be an issue. Olivia pats her subordinate, reminding her that they only have one life so they should be careful. Claudia asks if Olivia killed the enemy general. Olivia points to a severed head lying on the ground, identifying the man as Oswan von Glarwen. Seeing a smoke signal in the distance, Olivia asks if it is okay that they did not light the signal fire. Claudia is shocked that Olivia actually defeated him. Olivia casually remarks that defeating him was her job after all. Claudia realizes that with this, the main forces will now commence an all-out assault. When Olivia asks what they shall do now, Claudia suggests they could completely crush enemy morale by spreading news of their general's death. Olivia suggests attaching his head to the tip of a spear, reasoning that showing it directly would be the easiest way. Claudia is horrified, asking if Olivia would really go that far. Olivia replies that if Claudia does not want to, she does not care either way. Terrified, Claudia salutes and promises to have it prepared immediately. Olivia lets out a big yawn, noting that the battle has finally reached its turning point. The kingdom must also take Fort Casper. Olivia stretches her arms and sings cheerfully that the toils of a soldier never ends, while Claudia facepalms in the background, realizing her commander is completely unfazed by the carnage. Otto raised his arm high and dramatically declared that the silver spear has been unleashed, which was just a fancy way of saying the smoke signal was up. General Cornelius, seeing the signal, announced that they will now commence an all-out assault, ordering his troops to show no mercy to those who stand in their way. On the Imperial side, General George surveyed the devastation. A soldier reported that traces of battle indicated the main encampment was destroyed by a surprise attack from the enemy. George grabbed Vice Commander Silas by the collar, stating that if he were to entertain jokes at a time like this, he wouldn't be able to call himself a soldier, which was rich considering the situation. Silas reported that their left flank is currently holding, but even that is a question of how long, and furthermore, their right flank is in the midst of breaking. He added that they need to begin preparations to withdraw immediately. George gulped, realizing that just by standing there, they let the enemy press ever closer, and they can't afford to waste any more time. George pointed and declared that the main encampment has been destroyed, and they must withdraw immediately. He shouted that their path of retreat will be blocked at this rate. He yelled that as long as Fort Casper is held, they can recover from this situation, but by dying here, they lose any chance to regroup and re-engage. A soldier asked if General Oswan is safe. George remained silent for a moment before a soldier noted that a portion of the enemy seemed to be celebrating the death of the general. Another soldier reported that the kingdom's 7th Army is pushing forward relentlessly, though he admitted he cannot attest to the validity of the claim about the general. George simply said he sees, accepting the grim reality. Looking at the carnage, a soldier estimated that 30% of their forces are probably already gone. Another soldier asked how many of their armored cavalry remain alive, noting that whether or not half the remaining soldiers can even fight at full combat effectiveness is another issue. George looked at the mess and remarked that this is what happens when you look down on your foe. He said he understands. George ordered that once preparations are complete, they will withdraw to Fort Casper. He commanded to move the injured to the rear and deploy the defensive units. A soldier responded, "Yes, sir," at once, ready to flee. At the Imperial Army's right flank encampment, Commander Mintus screams in a panic, demanding to know how long his troops are going to dawdle around and ordering an immediate retreat back to Fort Casper. His shouting is met with absolute silence from the soldiers, who simply stare at him with dead, unimpressed eyes. Later historical accounts would politely state that Commander Mintus fell in a hail of arrows at the hands of the Kingdom Army during the Battle of Alm Plain. But the reality is that his own men are just done with his nonsense. One soldier internally tells someone to shut up, while another realizes they aren't preparing to withdraw because of his order. They are doing it simply because they don't want to die. The thought of dying together with an idiot commander is too much to bear, and joking about it isn't even an option. A soldier asks where His Excellency's horse is, pointing out that they are not His Excellency Mintus's personal guard. Another soldier angrily asks if Mintus dares suggest His Excellency withdraw on his own 2 feet. When Mintus yells, "You dare?" a soldier sarcastically suggests that if a horse is needed, perhaps Mintus should search for it himself. The soldier notes that what was just said could be considered treason, but he will overlook it, demanding they get going and bring His Excellency's horse now. Another soldier steps forward, saying if they wish to charge him for treason, please go ahead and do so. Chaos erupts as soldiers start fighting each other. One soldier yells, "Here!" and "Go ahead and try me!" while another yells, "Usava," before getting hit with a ja. A soldier yells, "Ga," as he is kicked. Mintus, losing his mind, holds a sword to a soldier's neck, screaming that he will have him beheaded at once and asking how dare he. The soldier calmly asks what uncouth acts are being committed against his aides, noting that the same could be said for His Excellency as well. Suddenly, archers turn their bows toward Mintus. Minty screams in terror, asking what insanity has bewitched them, and how lowly soldiers like them dare raise weapons at one of Imperial blood, though a caption notes he is a distant relative. A soldier states there is nothing to be said. He declares that their beloved Major Rayons was killed because of Mintus's stupidity. He points out that Rayons even sacrificed himself to let Mintus escape, which is exactly what Mintus should have done, admitting he almost died because of Mintus's plan. Commander Mintus screamed in terror as an arrow pierced straight through his forehead. A soldier, having completely lost patience with the incompetent commander, declared that since Mintus could not understand something as simple as the fact that his death was expected, he would die right there. Another soldier shouted for him to stop spewing nonsense. Mintus collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud, joining his aides in death as the soldiers stood over the bodies, having decided their fate with extreme prejudice. The scene was chaotic as arrows rained down on the mutineers' targets. A soldier with long dark hair stammered in shock, asking what was happening, before screaming the order to fire to cover their tracks. A volley of arrows was released to ensure the job was finished. Afterward, a soldier stood over the corpses of Mintus and his aides. He calmly reported that regrettably, His Excellency Mintus and his aides were caught in a hail of arrows from the kingdom's soldiers and killed in the line of duty, a convenient lie to cover up the mutiny. He ordered an immediate withdrawal to Fort Casper to report the situation, and his subordinate enthusiastically agreed to flee. Elsewhere on the battlefield, the Imperial armored cavalry was retreating amidst fierce fighting. To leave the Iris Plains, they had engaged in over 20 skirmishes, reducing their numbers to just 2,000 men. General George and Vice Commander Silas rode through rock formations. Silas suggested that once they passed these rocks, they would finally reach a plateau and should take a quick breather. George, looking utterly exhausted, hoped for a rest, but the battle was not yet over. A soldier pointed ahead and unfortunately informed his superior that a breather would not be possible. In front of an astonishing scene, the world of the retreating Imperials collapsed around them. Lieutenant Olivia rode forward on her horse. Behind her, a soldier held a spear high, displaying the severed head of General Oswan. General George stared in horror, muttering about what a tenacious bunch they were. His soldiers shouted in alarm, pointing at the approaching enemy. George's eyes went wide with terror as he realized who was chasing them. George, desperate and furious, realized that these were the ones who defeated the main force. He asked if they should eliminate them. Silas, however, looked resigned. He drew his sword. George asked since when the vice commander began spouting such absurdity, noting it was quite unlike him. Silas replied that, moreover, the lieutenant general's bad habits had rubbed off on him, implying he was done following foolish orders or perhaps ready to join the recklessness. Silas, fueled by rage and loyalty, declared that his blood was boiling at the mere thought of leaving General Oswan in his current headless state. He rallied his remaining soldiers, shouting that they were his soldiers, and charged back into the fray. George watched this display of suicidal bravery and thought to himself that he was surrounded by idiots, but then realized that was precisely why he respected them, or perhaps just why he was doomed. George reflected that normally he would ridicule the kingdom army for fielding a girl into battle. However, his instincts were screaming at him that this was no ordinary girl. He formulated a plan to first eliminate her horse to reduce her mobility. Realizing that this girl was truly dangerous, George charged at Olivia, swinging his sword with the intent to kill her horse. Olivia effortlessly blocked the attack. She smiled innocently and remarked that it was not nice to kill a horse. George, shocked by her strength and audacity, asked if she was the one who killed General Oswan. Olivia cheerfully confirmed that yes, that was her and she destroyed him. George realized his instincts were right. He gripped his sword tightly, vowing to remember the name Olivia, and screamed for her to cross over to the underworld as he launched a fierce attack. They clashed swords repeatedly. George asked if they could end it now, impatient for a kill. Olivia simply replied with a casual, "Oh, hoops," perhaps feigning a stumble or just being her usual confusing self. George laughed maniacally, remarking on what a sight it was to behold as she danced around his attacks so easily. Olivia, however, was done playing. She declared that she would be ending him now. George screamed that like hell she would end him and launched a desperate attack, swinging his sword with all his might. He looked absolutely shocked, shouting that this was impossible as Olivia moved faster than he could track. Olivia's eye focused intensely. She leaped high into the air, her sword poised for a downward strike, looking like a dark angel of death descending from the stormy sky. George looked up in sheer terror, realizing he was about to become a kebab. Silas screamed for his sir in horror. Olivia plunged her black sword straight down, piercing through George's helmet and skull with brutal efficiency. Silas, witnessing his general's instant death, screamed that she was a heathen and charged at her in a fit of rage. Olivia casually pulled her sword out of George's head, blood splattering everywhere. With a swift swing, Olivia cut down Silas and his horse in one motion. Silas tumbled off his mount as George's armored body finally collapsed to the ground. Within the next hour, the famous Imperial Armored Cavalry Division was completely annihilated, leaving nothing but corpses behind. After the slaughter, Olivia looked at her sword and noticed the rain had already stopped, expressing her disappointment because she probably wanted the rain to wash away the blood again. The battle concluded on the fourth day. The Imperial Army's main forces were wiped out by the surprise attack. General Oswan was dead, killed by Lieutenant Olivia, and the Battle of Alm Plain was over, with the kingdom's flags waving in the clearing sky. Claudia beamed with excitement, declaring that she never imagined they would be assigned as the vanguard for the assault on Fort Casper, calling it a prestigious honor. Olivia, lounging on the ground, simply didn't get it. She stated that instead of honor and prestige, she would much rather be given books or delicious food, priorities that clearly differed from her subordinates. Ashton, busy cutting bread, wondered aloud why he had recently been assigned as the person in charge of Olivia's meals. Olivia dismissed his confusion, explaining that the special mustard he made was so yummy that she just couldn't help asking for more. Ashton rationalized the extra work by telling himself that making meals for one person versus two wasn't much different time-wise, so it was fine. As Olivia cheered and reached for the food, she thought to herself that he was incredibly easy to read. Ashton tried to act cool with a hemph, but he was clearly pleased. Claudia chimed in, agreeing that the mustard was splendid enough that she wished to know the recipe, and asked Ashton to make some for her too. Olivia excitedly noted that Claudia agreed. Ashton asked if they had enjoyed the provisions lately, and Claudia confirmed they were delicious. Ashton then asked if Claudia was a knight. When she asked why that mattered, Claudia explained that knights are able to eat even more delicious food to their heart's content, having more opportunities than commoners. Ashton, holding the mustard jar, proudly declared that the mustard he uses does not lose to that fancy food at all. He paused, confused by his own confidence, but then completely fell for the flattery. He happily began preparing more food, humming a tune and telling them to wait just a little bit longer. Olivia watched him work and remarked once again that this young man really is easy to read. While the food situation was being sorted, Claudia ran the numbers. The Special Brigade's remaining forces numbered 200. She explained that if the enemy forces in Fort Casper numbered 5,000, standard military tactics dictated that capturing a fort required at least 3 times the occupying force. Therefore, attacking would essentially be impossible. She asked Lieutenant Olivia if she had any thoughts on the assault. However, the dramatic reveal came that assaulting and taking the fort was not their mission this time, rendering Claudia's tactical panic somewhat premature. Olivia was busy chewing on her food when Ashton gently reminded her to swallow first before trying to speak. Once she had gulped down her meal, she admitted that she hadn't really thought about the mission much yet, figuring she would come up with a plan after actually seeing the enemy. Claudia, ever the serious vice commander, explained their assigned role as the vanguard. They were to assault the fort relentlessly to exhaust and weaken the enemy defenses until the main forces arrived. She asked Olivia if she had come up with any ideas. Olivia, with a bright and cheerful expression that belied the darkness of her suggestion, proposed that she simply take the fort by herself. Claudia was taken aback, finding the idea incredibly gloomy and realizing with a sweat drop that Olivia was absolutely not joking. Internally, Claudia reasoned that taking a fort alone would be impossible, even for someone as powerful as Olivia. She listed the practical obstacles. They lacked siege engines. Breaking through the fortified front gate would be difficult, and the enemy certainly wouldn't just sit idle while they attacked. Olivia, however, insisted there had to be a way, even without siege equipment. Suddenly, she turned her attention to Ashton, dragging the poor guy into the strategic discussion by asking if he had any ideas on how they could capture Fort Casper by themselves. Ashton was startled to be included, while Claudia thought that a mere soldier shouldn't be part of such a high-level conversation. Ashton, however, began to think. He recalled that Fort Casper was built during the early days of the Warring Kingdoms era, meaning it was quite old. Based on this knowledge, he tentatively suggested that he thought a certain strategy would somewhat work. Claudia was shocked by his sudden confidence. Olivia beamed at Claudia, proudly announcing that Ashton was aiming to become a strategist, leaving Claudia stunned and Ashton looking rather nervous about the sudden promotion of his career goals. At Fort Casper, Colonel Broom, the head of defense for the Imperial Army, stared grimly at the reports. He demanded to know if there were any errors, insisting there was no margin for error. A subordinate confirmed that multiple scouts had verified the advance of the Kingdom Army. Broom apologized for his outburst but noted the reports were in disarray. He asked about the main force, and a soldier reported that around 2,000 enemy forces had been spotted. Broom was confused, asking what about the main force. Broom slammed his fist on the desk, yelling at an imbecile to hurry and get confirmation. A bell rang as Major Lanchester, Broom's aide, entered the room. Broom ordered him to inform the troops about the enemy advance and prepare for a counterattack. Lanchester questioned if the Southern Army was really defeated in a mere week, noting they still didn't know the details. Broom found it hard to believe but acknowledged that with General Oswan in charge, it shouldn't be the case. A soldier rushed in to report that there were no signs of the main Kingdom Army following the advance force. Broom wondered what was going on. He questioned if the kingdom really thought Fort Casper could be captured with a mere 2,000 soldiers, or if the main Kingdom Army had been defeated and these were just remnants resolved to fight to the last man. Deciding there was no use in overthinking it due to lacking intel, he stopped his spiraling thoughts. 2 hours later, the Imperial Army's Fort Casper defensive force stood ready on the walls as the Kingdom Army's Special Brigade led by Olivia met them on the battlefield. The battle commences with long-range attacks by the Special Brigade's longbow unit, as archers draw their bows and release a volley of arrows. However, the defenders on the castle walls are merely confused, wondering what the attackers are doing since the arrows fall pathetically short of the target. The arrows land harmlessly in the dirt far away from the fort, looking more like a warning shot for a picnic than a siege. The Imperial soldiers on the walls burst into laughter, mocking the attackers as a rabble of amateurs who clearly have no idea how to wage war. They joke about how scared the enemy must be to shoot from such a ridiculous distance, wondering if they even know the range of their own bows. A commander yells at his men to stop standing around and orders them to hurry and return fire with the ballistas, confident that their weapons can easily cover the distance. Meanwhile, Claudia, riding a horse, orders all forces to retreat, instructing them to block any potential counter, attack arrows with shields, and withdraw out of range immediately. This cycle of shooting, missing, and retreating repeats itself in a rinse and repeat fashion, with the kingdom army laughing as they run away, followed by a short break. Claudia, sweating nervously, asks Ashton if this strategy will really work. Ashton admits that while he knows this prevents any casualties to their forces, he is worried that the enemy is surely ridiculing them right now. Ashton argues that if they win in the end, they will have the last laugh, so as long as that happens, the style of fighting doesn't matter, even if it feels a bit unknightly to him. Claudia yells at him in frustration, asking how he could even think of such a strategy. According to Ashton, forts built during the Warring Kingdoms era will definitely contain a secret escape tunnel. The plan is to split their forces into two groups. One group, presumably led by the terrifying Olivia, is there to draw the attention of the enemy forces. The other group is to take advantage of that opportunity to sneak in and unlatch the front gate. Furthermore, the tunnel exit will generally lead to an old well nearby. Their current show of force is nothing more than a facade to deceive the eyes of the enemy. As long as the main gate is open, the special brigade can easily invade Fort Casper, using this well as an entrance, turning a pathetic archery display into a clever Trojan horse strategy, except with a well instead of a horse. Ashton reflected that while he had called it a strategy, it could hardly be called one. He admitted that he had simply asked Olivia to do the impossible because he had seen firsthand just how strong she truly was. Meanwhile, Olivia waved cheerfully to her troops, announcing that she would be back in a bit before heading off to do whatever impossible thing she had been tasked with. Claudia explained the logic behind the secret tunnel plan. Since the Imperial forces had taken Fort Casper from the kingdom, even the original occupants like herself hadn't known of the tunnel's existence in their wildest dreams. She reasoned that the enemy wouldn't have imagined it either. She noted that this plan wouldn't work in the first place if one didn't know the layout of the fort, revealing that she had read every book on military history and warfare she could lay her hands on. Ashton listened and replied that he would be glad if he could increase the survival rate of those around him, even if just by a little. Ashton looked at Claudia with a serious expression and admitted that he, too, did not wish to die yet. The narration noted that war reaps the souls of soldiers relentlessly, and the fellow soldier standing next to you today may not be by your side tomorrow. Ashton understood this grim reality, which was why he was absorbing as much knowledge as possible even now, so he could work towards reducing sacrifices. He persevered even in the face of death, even if he wished to flee. Claudia looked at him and realized they couldn't die that easily after coming this far. She agreed with him. She then shouted an order for all forces to retreat. The narration concluded that by eluding the god of death, the survivors are the victors. Meanwhile, as the special brigade poured all their effort into distracting the defending Imperial forces, a different group was navigating a dark, cobweb-filled tunnel. The air felt stale down there, leading one soldier to remark that it really looked like no one had used this tunnel in a long time. Another soldier pointed out yet another spider web, proving the place was truly abandoned. A brown rat squeaked and scurried away from their torchlight, likely fleeing the impending violence. Sergeant Gauss, leading the Fort Casper invasion party, admitted to Lieutenant Olivia that he honestly didn't think they would be able to enter Fort Casper this smoothly. Olivia simply agreed with a cheerful yep, confident in their sneakiness. They finally reached the tunnel exit, which turned out to be an old well. Olivia was delighted, noting that Ashton had guessed the general area of the tunnel location for them. She promptly squashed a rat that got in the way, proving her efficiency against rodents was just as high as her efficiency against soldiers. She credited the success entirely to Ashton's book smarts. When Gauss asked how they would be splitting their forces, Olivia reminded him that they had already decided to divide their forces equally into two. She then cheerfully announced that she would be going in by herself to distract the enemy. Everyone else would go to open the gate, letting Claudia and the others in. Gauss was horrified that she planned to do this by herself, realizing she was essentially a one-woman army. Olivia explained her logic when she was alone. She could swing her sword around to her heart's content without worrying about hitting allies. Gauss, clearly worried about her safety, and perhaps the safety of the enemy, suggested she take at least 10 people or so. Olivia just laughed and patted his shoulder, telling him he didn't need to worry about her. Gauss looked absolutely gloomy about the situation, muttering that he didn't think she would hit them, but nothing was for certain, right? Implying that friendly fire was a genuine concern with Olivia's wild swinging. Olivia gave the final orders. Gauss and the rest were to stay there for about 30 minutes, and then start the operation. Gauss understood. As she walked away, Gauss called out for her to be careful. Olivia thanked him and said she would. She walked deeper into the tunnel until she saw a light ahead signaling her arrival inside the fort. Olivia emerged into a storage room inside the fort. She was amazed, exclaiming that the place was just like how it was described in the books she had read. She pushed open a door with a loud bang, subtlety clearly not her strong suit. She looked around the dusty room. Suddenly, she spotted a soldier walking away down the hallway. She began to tiptoe happily, ready to cause some chaos. A confused Imperial soldier demanded to know where the commanding officer was. Olivia appeared before him and calmly asked who the human in charge was right now. The soldier, baffled by her presence, asked what she was saying. Olivia bluntly informed him that Mr. Oswan was already dead. The soldier recoiled in shock, calling her words ridiculous. He insisted that General Oswan was obviously in the midst of fighting the kingdom forces at the Iris Plains. Suspicious, the soldier demanded to know which squad she was from, realizing too late that something was terribly wrong. Olivia cheerfully revealed she was from the Special Brigade. The soldier screamed in horror, realizing she was from the kingdom. Olivia shushed him with a finger to his lips. She then promptly stabbed him through the chest. Another soldier nearby heard the commotion and yelled to know who was making all that noise. Olivia held the dying soldier upright, casually telling him it was not time to be noisy yet. More soldiers rushed in, discovering the scene. Olivia lamented that she had planned to start by killing the commanding officers first, but things rarely went according to plan. She stood over the body, remarking that this was how it ended up anyway. She turned to face the new group of terrified soldiers, her black sword ready. 30 minutes later, Sergeant Gauss and his team stood at the entrance of the tunnel, looking absolutely horrified. The tunnel was a slaughterhouse, filled with bodies and blood splattered everywhere. Gauss noted with a sweat that their body parts were all scattered around. A dying soldier groaned in pain nearby, barely clinging to life. Despite the gore, Gauss found himself thinking that he was very glad Lieutenant Olivia was on their side. He heard cries echoing from deeper within the fort. He realized those cries were unmistakably the sound of the lieutenant fighting. Steeling himself, he ordered his men to head to the front gate now. In the Fort Casper strategy room, Major Padoin screamed in frustration, demanding to know how long it would take to deal with a single intruder. A soldier rushed in, breathless, correcting him that it wasn't just a single intruder but a monster wielding a black sword, adding that Colonel Broom must have heard the rumors too. Padoin scoffed at the idea of a monster, calling it ridiculous nonsense. He confidently suggested that as long as they trapped it in an enclosed area, they could just shoot it from a distance to end it. The soldier, sweating profusely, admitted he had already tried that exact tactic. He recounted how the moment the archers fired their arrows, the monster appeared right in front of them, and the heads of 3 soldiers were sent spinning into the air before anyone could blink. Padoin, losing his mind, slammed his foot down and screamed that if that wasn't a monster, he didn't know what was. The soldier, having had enough, stated he had reported on the situation and requested to be relieved of any further duties. Padoin called him an ingrate for abandoning his post in the midst of battle. The soldier, seemingly accepting his fate, laughed and asked if he was going to be executed for desertion, adding that whether the colonel believed the story or not was up to him, though he might as well be living in a fairy tale for believing it. Colonel Broom, looking grim, told the soldier to go ahead and leave. He turned to his aide, Lanchester, and quietly stated they would deal with the deserter later. Lanchester asked for the colonel's thoughts on the report. Broom admitted that, while it was hard to judge, he believed what Major Padoin said was based on facts, and it would likely be wise to take action. He somberly added that he didn't think he would be able to leave the fort alive anyway. Lanchester, shocked, asked if he was being serious. Lanchester explained that there were existences in this world that humans simply could not fight against, akin to a natural disaster. Broom's eyes went wide as he shouted, asking if he was saying they were facing a sorcerer. Lanchester confirmed that was about right and asked the colonel to wait a moment as he walked out of the room. Left alone, a sweating Broom wondered what the best course of action would be if that truly was the case. Colonel Broom examined the weapon placed before him, a test sample sent by the engineering division. He identified it as a handheld ballista, noting that its speed and damage capabilities far surpassed anything a standard archer could achieve. He grimly suggested they use this superior firepower to kill the monster before the situation in the fort deteriorated any further. Suddenly, a soldier burst into the strategy room, screaming that the kingdom army had broken through the front gate and was surging into the fort. Broom, prioritizing etiquette over the impending doom, yelled at the man for daring to enter without knocking. The soldier frantically apologized and delivered his emergency report, explaining that the enemy hadn't used siege engines. Instead, enemy soldiers had suddenly appeared inside the walls to unlatch the gate for the sieging forces. Broom realized with horror that the monstrous girl was simply a diversion. Their true aim had been to open the gates all along. Desperate to maintain control, Broom insisted the battle was not yet lost, arguing that based on numbers alone, they could still overwhelm the enemy. Lanchester, however, looked utterly terrified and resigned to his fate, declaring that he would also take command and join the fray. Broom stared at his aide, the name Lanchester escaping his lips in shock as he realized how dire things truly were. The narration noted that soldier morale, the most important factor in war, had essentially fallen to nothing. With a frightening monster lurking inside and the front gate fallen, the moment they could have used their advantage in numbers had already passed. Outside, Claudia rode forward on her horse, shouting orders for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd battalions to move forward and take all strategic points at once. Jairu, a soldier with more enthusiasm than sense, declared to everyone that as the self-appointed captain of Lieutenant Olivia's personal guard, this was his time to shine. He shouted at the troops not to dare do anything to disgrace the name of their war maiden, rallying them with a loud hey. Claudia watched the display, thinking that while naming himself captain was inexcusable, it was surprisingly boosting their troop morale. Ashton stood beside her, apologizing for having to witness such a spectacle. Claudia wondered when exactly that man had decided he was the captain of the personal guard, but the troops seemed to buy into his energy. An hour later, the result of that energy combined with sheer terror was evident. Enemy soldiers were begging for mercy, promising to surrender quietly and not even think of resisting, pleading to be taken as prisoners. Claudia remarked that appeared Ashton's strategy had succeeded spectacularly. Ashton, looking embarrassed, replied that they couldn't really say it that way. Claudia observed that judging by the state of the captive enemy soldiers, the surrender was actually a result of something Olivia did. Ashton agreed that was certainly true. Claudia and Ashton stood before the fort walls, realizing that Lieutenant Olivia must have done something extraordinary. The narration explained that this something was the complete annihilation of morale in the numerically superior enemy. Inside, Olivia was seen holding a severed head by the hair, asking the terrified defenders if they were the ones calling her the rumored monster. Standing on a ledge, covered in blood, Olivia denied that she was a monster and declared that her name was Olivia. The narration ironically noted that assaulting a fort single-handedly was exactly the kind of thing people called a monster. In the foreground, a handheld ballista lay ready, a testament to the desperate measures the defenders had considered against the girl who refused to die. Olivia stood before Colonel Broom, casually holding a severed head by the hair. She cheerfully asked if he was the commanding officer, Colonel Broom, noting that the head in her hand had been kind enough to give up his location before expiring. With a casual toss, she threw the gruesome projectile directly at him. Broom recoiled as the head flew past. He realized he was spewing the same words as Padoin now. He thought that for those who don't look to the future, there was no use crying over spilt milk. He couldn't help but call her a monster for single-handedly throwing a fort into chaos. He remembered when he himself had dismissed Padoin's claims so easily. Now, faced with the reality, he wondered if this was what they called déjà vu. He screamed in desperation, asking if that wasn't a monster, then what could possibly be. Olivia calmly stated that it was their complete loss. She noted that Claudia and the rest seemed to be taking over the fort right now, so she didn't think he would be able to win. She added that since Mr. Broom was her enemy, she didn't mind what he called her. However, Broom wasn't done. He raised a handheld ballista, aiming it directly at her. The weapon fired with immense speed, but Olivia simply caught the projectile in her gloved hand, stopping it dead in its tracks. Broom muttered that as he thought, she really was a monster. He let out a dark, resigned laugh. Olivia looked at the bolt stuck in her palm, impressed. She exclaimed, "Wow." She commented that it was way stronger than a normal arrow and admitted she was a bit surprised by the impact. Olivia cheerfully asked Colonel Broom if she could have the handheld ballista he had tried to kill her with. Broom resignedly thought that the weapon was no use to him now anyway. Olivia then shouted that if he wanted it, he could have it, and proceeded to hurl the entire heavy crossbow directly at his face with terrifying strength. The weapon struck Broom, impaling him instantly. Blood dripped from the wound as he slumped over, thinking that he had expected this outcome. Olivia, meanwhile, hoisted the captured ballista onto her shoulder with a bright smile. She thanked him very much for the gift, promising to treasure it. She giggled to herself, thinking she needed to go show Ashton and Claudia her new toy. She mused that she had received a pocket watch before, and now she had acquired another interesting thing, treating war trophies like souvenirs from a gift shop. Elsewhere, Commanders Otto and Paul stared in disbelief. One of them shouted that it was impossible for Fort Casper to have already been taken. A soldier confirmed the news, reporting that the Special Brigade had already taken over the fort. He added that during the assault, they had suffered only 8 casualties. The commander was shocked by the low number, exclaiming 8. The soldier explained that most of the Imperial forces did not put up any resistance and simply surrendered, likely because they didn't want to end up like their colonel. Otto reflected on his decision, noting that knowing Lieutenant Olivia would be able to chip away at the enemy forces despite leading only a small attack force, he had tested out assigning her as the vanguard. He realized they would no longer be able to describe her accomplishments as simple heroism anymore, as she was basically a one-woman army. A soldier saluted and was ordered to pass along a message to Lieutenant Olivia to not let down her guard. The commander understood the situation but was still reeling from the fact that Fort Casper had fallen in only one day. Paul remarked that he didn't think Olivia would be satisfied with only cake now as a reward. He then suggested that, more importantly, the victory was likely the work of the temporarily appointed strategist, that new soldier named Ashton. Otto told him, please don't joke around, though the idea that the bread maker was the mastermind behind the victory wasn't entirely wrong given his tunnel plan. Otto asked if anyone knew anything about Ashton, admitting this was the first time he was hearing about him. Olivia suddenly remembered Ashton mentioning that the bread in the capital was the best, and she felt she absolutely must eat it. When pressed for details about Ashton, Olivia simply stated that Ashton was just Ashton and that he was a human, a description that was as helpful as describing water as wet. 2 weeks later at Fort Casper, the scene shifted to the commander's office. Ashton asked Olivia why she had been staring at her pocket watch for the last few minutes. Olivia explained that she had never heard Lieutenant Colonel Otto was super strict about being on time, though she reasoned that being in the army obviously meant being on time was important. She then loudly introduced herself, Warrant Officer Claudia, and Private Ashton right in front of the door. Ashton panicked and tried to quiet her down, reminding her they were in front of the commander's office. Inside, Otto yelled for them to just come in since they were reporting right on time. He was surprised to learn Ashton was actually a private. The trio entered and saluted. Ashton was visibly nervous, especially upon realizing General Paul was also in the room, causing him to shiver. Olivia immediately brightened up and asked if they were getting cake. General Paul told them they hadn't been called there just for the sake of it, but acknowledged they had done well. Otto asked if cake was the only thing Olivia cared about. Olivia cheerfully replied that nope, not at all, she also liked reading books. Paul laughed, remarking that Lieutenant Olivia hadn't changed at all. Otto noted that there was certainly no problem with increasing one's own knowledge, but clarified they didn't call her to the commander's office just to ask about her fancies. Paul apologized, but informed Olivia that her beloved cake would have to wait until they returned to Fort Gallia. Olivia looked absolutely devastated by this news, her soul seemingly leaving her body. Paul then turned his attention to Private Ashton Zennefielder. Ashton responded with a yes, sir. Paul stated that he had heard the report from Warrant Officer Claudia regarding the assault on Fort Casper and wanted to first recognize Ashton's contribution. Ashton thanked him very much. General Paul began by stating that the assault on Fort Casper wouldn't have been possible in the first place if Lieutenant Olivia wasn't there. He recognized that without her, the fort would not have been taken so easily. Ashton, flustered and blushing, tried to interject that his own contribution was nothing compared to hers. However, Claudia chimed in, noting that she had heard the victory was also due to Private Ashton's strategy. Olivia enthusiastically agreed with Claudia, shouting that yes, that's right, they took the fort easily all because of Ashton. Otto immediately yelled at the two of them to stop because General Paul had not finished speaking yet. Olivia turned to Ashton and whispered that, by the way, he should speak to her formally in front of Lieutenant Colonel Otto, or he would get mad. Ashton was confused, wondering why she was telling him this now. General Paul then addressed Ashton directly. He mentioned that he heard Ashton's assignment as Lieutenant Olivia's strategist was a temporary one. He asked Ashton how about this. Ashton, realizing he had interrupted, apologized for his transgression. Paul reassured him that it was all right. Paul then asked Ashton if he would accept a position under Lieutenant Olivia as her official strategist. Ashton was completely shocked by the offer. He realized Paul was being serious. Internally, Ashton panicked. He thought to himself that he was simply lucky this time because of the books on military history and warfare he read occasionally. He felt he simply didn't have the confidence to imagine himself enacting strategies to deal with any situation. Olivia looked at Ashton with a warm, encouraging smile. Ashton looked back at her, thinking that her smile right here and right now wasn't fair. Placing his hand over his heart, Ashton declared that he would gladly accept the position, though he was unsure how much he would be able to contribute. Paul said, "Well said," and then asked for his thoughts. Ashton was shocked that this was happening right now but managed to say yes. Paul noted that though this was quite sudden, they would like to hear some of his thoughts as a strategist. Otto stepped in to help, telling Ashton there was no need to be so nervous and that first, Lieutenant Colonel Otto would explain the details. Lieutenant Colonel Otto listed the mountain of issues they now faced, which included dispatching forces to strategic positions, ensuring thorough scouting and surveillance, and taking back the nearby towns and villages controlled by the enemy. However, the most pressing issue was how to deal with the 4,000 prisoners of war they had captured. Although they succeeded in retaking the fort, they could not let their guard down until they decided on the next steps for taking Fortress Keel. Keeping the prisoners fed was already not a trivial matter, and since there were no labor camps or mines in the vicinity of the fort to assign them to, they could not just have them executed either. Otto turned to the new strategist and asked what Private Ashton thought, inviting him to contribute any good suggestions, though his face certainly did not say please feel free. Ashton nervously suggested negotiating for a prisoner exchange with the Imperial forces. General Paul and Otto were intrigued and asked him to explain the details. Claudia helped explain that there were two merits to this plan. The first merit was immediately resolving the food problem if the negotiations succeeded. The second merit was the strengthening of the kingdom army with the return of their own soldiers. Ashton noted that regarding the latter, he believed the kingdom had more to benefit from this judging by the current state of affairs, though he worried if there was no meaning if the Empire received the same terms. Ashton elaborated that from a human rights standpoint, the Empire would have no choice but to come to the negotiation table. He reasoned that since soldiers like him, who could not even wield a weapon properly, were being sent to the front lines and would die immediately if caught off guard, the Empire would not dare disgrace the name of Emperor Ramuza, who was known across the continent. Otto pointed out that prisoner exchanges were usually negotiated when high-profile individuals were captured, like those connected to royalty, and there had been no precedents involving common soldiers. Despite the lack of precedent, General Paul stated that Ashton's suggestion was worthy of serious consideration. Otto agreed that it certainly was of value. Paul told Private Ashton that he looked forward to his future accomplishments. After the meeting, Paul asked Otto what he thought. Paul believed Ashton's ideas had potential. Otto admitted he also had no objections and felt that the strategies Ashton demonstrated in the capture of Fort Casper were not just a fluke. Paul mused that the idea of a prisoner exchange between common soldiers was not something he could have come up with. They agreed that it would be intolerable, even more so coming from the enemy, if an unprecedented idea like this was brought before them unexpectedly. While outside Olivia, Ashton and Claudia ran happily together. The scene shifts to the Earthbelt Empire's imperial capital, Alstead, specifically within the Grand Castle Leestreen. In Felix's office, Lieutenant Theresa, the adjutant to General Felix von Seeger, stands with a grim expression, delivering a devastating report. She reads from a document detailing the catastrophic losses, the fall of Fort Casper, the death of General Oswan and his subordinates, and the staggering loss of over 45,000 soldiers. General Felix von Seeger, the head of the Azure Knights, listens in silence. He reflects that, as he suspected, depriving General Oswan of the ideal opportunity to attack led to his inaction and eventual defeat. Felix regrets that he didn't voice more support for Oswan's perfect plan to assault Fort Gallia, even if it meant being reprimanded. He recalls the Emperor and Prime Minister d'Armes advising Oswan to merely observe the kingdom's movements for the time being, a decision that ultimately cost them the entire army. Theresa interrupts his somber thoughts to inform him that a meeting of the three generals has been scheduled to discuss this recent setback. Felix is surprised by the summons. Theresa explains that General of the Armies Gladen and General Rosen Marie have been recalled from their respective battlefronts to be briefed on the current status of the war. This gathering is per the direct order of Prime Minister d'Armes, commanding them to assemble in Conference Room No. 2 within 2 hours. The stage is set for the gathering of the Empire's 3 strongest generals to address the crisis. In Conference Room No. 2 of Castle Lestrain, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. General Rosemarie von Berlinetta, head of the Crimson Knights, stared at the report in front of her hand trembling slightly. She asked if the report of General Oswan's death was true. General Gladen von Hildesheimer, the leader of the Empire's 3 generals and head of the Sun Knights, confirmed it grimly. He stated there was no mistaking it. Testimonies from soldiers who fled to Fortress Keel were clear. Numerous soldiers had reported seeing Oswan's head mounted on a spear. Felix von Seeger, head of the Azure Knights, observed Rosemary silently. He noted to himself that her desire to deny the report must be strong, considering she was Oswan's former chief officer. Unable to contain her grief and rage, Rosemary slammed her hand on the table and declared that she would head to the southern front immediately. She vowed to crush the 7th Army, and whoever was responsible with her Crimson Knights, regardless of the cost. When Felix pointed out that her absence would leave the northern front without a commander, Rosemary dismissively told Gladen he could just fill in for her since he had lots of free time anyways. Gladen erupted in anger, calling her an ingrate. He reminded her that Felix had the essential role of defending the Imperial capital and could not be moved so foolishly. He questioned if she really thought her selfish whims would just happen. Rosemary scoffed, arguing that the current Kingdom Army did not possess the strength to invade the Empire, and insulted Gladen by saying the great general of the armies must be getting old if he thought otherwise. Gladen was offended, shouting, "How dare you!" Felix stepped in to mediate, agreeing that while the Kingdom Army currently lacked the strength to invade, his elite Azure Knights being permanently based in the capital, where the Emperor resided, set the masses at ease and acted as a strong deterrent against the ambitions of other nations. Firmly stated that without the explicit order of His Imperial Majesty, the Azure Knights could not be mobilized, though he admitted that an immediate response was still necessary regardless of General Rosemary's earlier outbursts. The presiding commander at the head of the long table grimly acknowledged the reality of the situation, noting that with the loss of Fort Casper, the Empire had now completely lost control over the southern regions of the kingdom. He requested a brief moment to address the matter properly. Prime Minister d'Armes, a hooded figure whose single visible eye gleamed with unsettling calm, immediately interjected. He declared that leaving the kingdom's southern region in its current state would not pose an issue. When another officer asked if His Excellency already had a plan in mind, d'Armes simply replied that he had nothing of that sort in particular. The commander was left thoroughly confused, demanding to know what exactly he meant by that vague statement. d'Armes clarified that the situation at the southern front was already a stalemate, and he saw no meaning in being obstinate about a previous strategy. He pointed out that as long as Fortress Keel remained in Imperial hands, the Kingdom Army was unable to launch a sudden attack. The commander was forced to agree that this tactical assessment was true, though d'Armes casually reminded them that reports stated the death of over 45 Zalthosen Imperial soldiers during the campaign. He labeled the massive casualty count a truly regrettable tragedy and suggested they hold a moment of silence, though his demeanor suggested he was more interested in watching the room simmer than actually mourning. d'Armes then turned his attention to the commander, asking if His Imperial Majesty was aware of the loss of Fort Casper. The commander confirmed that he had already informed the Emperor. d'Armes added that, incidentally, His Imperial Majesty was also in agreement that the Empire should pull back from the kingdom's southern region. General Rosemary, who had been vibrating with fury over the defeat, was momentarily stunned by this revelation. She noticed with creeping dread that the Prime Minister had actually smiled while delivering the news of the retreat. The commander immediately snapped at her, shouting that now was not the time for trivial matters and demanding to know how she planned to take revenge for General Oswan under these circumstances. Rosemary was left speechless, internally screaming about what part of avenging a fallen general could possibly be considered trivial. d'Armes, ever the master of quiet manipulation, calmly addressed General Rosemary and whispered that her chance at revenge may unexpectedly come sooner than she expected, leaving the entire room trapped in a heavy, suspicious silence. In the conference room at Castle Lestrain, Prime Minister d'Armes laid out a chilling prediction. He stated that based on the situation so far, the kingdom forces that had taken Fort Casper would likely not move on to Fort Gallia, since they could establish a strong defensive line along their current location. When a subordinate asked what this had to do with getting revenge for General Oswan, the Prime Minister's words were clearly intended to rile up General Rosenmary. Darmies claimed this was simply his prediction, but the strategic implications were already forming. A map of the front lines showed the Empire's dilemma. Upon establishing a defensive line in their southern region, the kingdom's forces would only advance on one of either the central or northern front. The reasoning was that the kingdom army was not leaving any military strength in reserve, forcing them to push forward. Darms noted that he couldn't fathom the current kingdom army doing otherwise. Rosenmary, processing this information, realized the true nature of the plan. She summarized that in short, she just needed to drag those forces to the northern front, whether they liked it or not. Darms praised her, noting that she was quick on the uptake, as expected of General Rosenmary. 3 days after the meeting, per decree of Emperor Ramuza, orders were dispatched for the complete withdrawal of the Imperial army from the kingdom's southern regions, setting the trap in motion. Meanwhile, at the newly captured Fort Casper, Lieutenant Olivia and Claudia were engaging in a friendly spar. Claudia warned that although it was a friendly spar, she would not be holding back. Olivia casually replied that she would try not to injure her, so she shouldn't worry, completely missing the tension in the air. Claudia was internally fuming, thinking that Olivia was making light of her. She realized with a shock that she had never experienced such a massive gap in ability, not even from her father, who was one of the kingdom's 10 swords. Olivia stood ready, sensing an overwhelming difference in swordsmanship due to her training and devotion to the sword, a gap that simply could not be overcome. Undeterred by the terrifying realization that she was essentially challenging a natural disaster to a duel, Claudia charged forward, declaring "Here I come" as she launched her attack. The sparring session began with a resounding clang as Claudia's sword met Olivia's defense. Claudia grunted in exertion, feeling entirely like a toddler trying to fight a grown adult with a foam bat. The swords clashed again and again, but Olivia blocked every single strike with a casual smile, not even breaking a sweat while Claudia was already panting. Claudia realized with a sinking feeling that her father, who was considered one of the kingdom's 10 swords, wasn't even worthy of comparison to this girl. Olivia had already transcended normal strength and entered the realm of heroes celebrated in myths and legends. Simply calling her strong was a massive understatement. Suddenly, Olivia announced that it was her turn now. Before Claudia could even blink, Olivia closed the distance in an instant, moving so fast that despite Claudia keeping her guard up, she couldn't react in time. Olivia delivered a swift kick that sent Claudia flying backward with a gasp. As Claudia tumbled to the ground, Olivia leaned in close and complimented her, noting that she had really good eyes which seemed pretty handy. This was likely a reference to Claudia's ability to perceive the gap in their skill, though it sounded suspiciously like a creepy pickup line. Olivia cheerfully asked if she wanted to keep going. Claudia, lying on the ground and sweating profusely, internally screamed that her commander was absolutely creepy, but externally, she politely apologized and enthusiastically agreed to continue. Standing back up with her sword raised, Claudia declared that she was ready for round 2, proving that her masochistic dedication to training was just as strong as her swordsmanship. Claudia stood frozen in confusion as Olivia vanished from her line of sight yet again. Frantically spinning around with a whirl, she tried to anticipate the attack, thinking that surely this time she would catch her. But before she could even finish the thought, Olivia reappeared directly behind her, casually resting the tip of her sword against Claudia's neck and telling her to freeze. Olivia smiled and complimented Claudia, stating that she was actually quite strong and must have trained very hard. However, she also gave a friendly warning that Claudia shouldn't use her eyes too much because it looked really tiring. Claudia, feeling the strain, admitted that her eyes did feel drained. She reflected internally that she had never revealed the true nature of her eyes to anyone else before. Ever since her closest childhood friend found the power creepy, she had kept it hidden, and even she didn't know much about it. Claudia asked if Olivia knew exactly what her power was. Olivia confirmed she did, mentioning she had been taught a lot of things. When Claudia asked who her teacher was, Olivia playfully dodged the question, saying she would tell her someday. Claudia then guessed that the move where Olivia disappeared was called the flash step technique. Olivia confirmed this was correct and explained that the technique she used just now was the same one. She added that if it was Claudia, she might actually be able to learn it too, though she admitted she got tired if she used it too much. Claudia was shocked and excited by the possibility. Suddenly shifting gears from combat to cuisine, Olivia announced that she was already hungry and it was time for breakfast. Claudia, seizing the opportunity, asked to be taught the technique next time, and Olivia agreed. To show her gratitude for the sparring session, Claudia offered to treat Lieutenant Olivia to the special breakfast set that morning. The narration noted that this set came with an additional charge and was quite expensive, which was likely the only reason Olivia was so enthusiastic about the offer. Olivia cheered happily and sprinted toward the cafeteria, shouting for Claudia to hurry up. Claudia, resigned to her fate as the wallet for this operation, chased after her lieutenant, calling out her title as they ran. 1 month after the recapture of Fort Casper, Ashton found himself roped into military affairs, acting as Lieutenant Colonel Otto's personal aide during the closed-door negotiations for a prisoner exchange. From a human rights standpoint, Ashton had suggested the exchange, and as predicted, the Empire accepted. However, the Empire requested a controversial condition for the agreement. The signing ceremony would take place at Fortress Keel, deep within enemy territory. The kingdom officers were incensed by this demand. They shouted that they were the victors and should hold the ceremony at Fort Casper, questioning why they had to enter enemy land at all. General Paul, meanwhile, sat calmly drinking tea, lamenting that being a leader was hard. He internally cursed Otto, calling him a rascal for not being there to handle the mess, though it was Paul himself who had ordered Otto away on inspections in the first place. The officers continued to protest the Empire's demand to limit the kingdom's escort to just 100 men. They argued this was an invitation for an assassination attempt. Paul dismissed their fears, claiming that 100 men were sufficient to ward off bandits, but few enough not to appear as a threat in enemy territory, calling it a well-thought-out plan. When the officers fell silent, intimidated by his glare and asking if they had anything more to say, Paul dropped the final bombshell this time. His personal escort would be Lieutenant Olivia. He confidently stated he couldn't imagine the Empire resorting to underhanded means given their disadvantageous position, effectively silencing any further objections with the sheer confidence that his personal monster could handle anything. The officers, initially terrified, immediately scrambled to agree with General Paul's decision. They shouted that they had no objections if Lieutenant Olivia was acting as the escort, insisting that nothing would go wrong if she was there, before practically tripping over themselves to excuse themselves and leave the room. A week later, General Paul and his company departed Fort Casper, setting their course north toward Fortress Keel. As they rode, General Paul pointed out the massive structure in the distance, noting to Olivia that it was what was once celebrated as the impregnable Fortress Keel. Olivia was instantly awestruck, exclaiming loudly that the fortress was so much bigger and cooler than Fort Gallia. Paul, looking slightly wary of her volume, reminded her that the fortress was once the kingdom's, but was taken by the Empire due to the incompetence of their troops. Olivia simply replied that she knew, and cheerfully stated that if it was taken, they just needed to take it back, exactly like they did with Fort Casper. Paul chuckled at her simplicity, while Claudia found it strange that hearing Olivia say it with such confidence made her feel like they actually could easily do so. The group then approached the massive, closed gates of the enemy stronghold. The heavy iron gates of Fortress Keel groaned open with a resounding thunk, revealing a line of stoic, armored Imperial soldiers standing at attention. General Paul and his entourage rode in, greeted immediately by a woman in a crisp Imperial uniform. She saluted sharply, acknowledging the Kingdom General, His Excellency Paul. She expressed that it was an honor to meet him, noting that his fame as a demon on the battlefield was well known even within the Imperial Army. Introducing herself as Lieutenant Theresa, their guide for the stay, she graciously invited them to rest from their travels. As they moved deeper into the fortress, passing through Gate No. 2 and approaching Gate No. 3, Lieutenant Theresa dropped a condition. Citing security purposes, she kindly requested that only 2 of Paul's guards accompany him any further, stating that rooms had been prepared for the rest of the escort to rest. Claudia, ever the protective vice commander, was instantly outraged, shouting for her to hold it right there and calling it a suspiciously convenient request. Paul, however, remained calm, placing a hand on her shoulder and telling her it was fine. He designated Lieutenant Olivia and Warrant Officer Claudia as the 2 who would escort him. Theresa looked momentarily flustered by the choice of the terrifying monster girl as an escort, but quickly recovered, apologizing and inviting the trio inside. The official ceremony for the prisoner exchange was held the next morning in a grand hall lined with massive pillars. General Paul stood before his counterpart, General Felix, the head of the renowned Azure Knights. The atmosphere was tense but polite. Felix admitted that his spine tingled as their eyes met, acknowledging Paul's fearsome reputation as a demon on the battlefield. Paul returned the sentiment, stating it was an honor to finally meet the head of the Azure Knights. Felix then remarked that Paul was younger than he had expected, to which Paul simply replied that he heard that very often, while Olivia and Claudia stood stoically behind him. The ceremony concluded smoothly, maintaining a pleasant atmosphere on the surface, but General Felix was visibly shaken. He turned to General Paul with a look of shock, asking if he was feeling unwell, likely trying to mask his own disturbance at the overwhelming presence he had just felt. Later, Felix spoke with Lieutenant Theresa behind bars, inquiring if the kingdom's delegation had departed. When she confirmed they had just left, he asked if she had spoken with the two officers escorting General Paul. Theresa replied that she hadn't particularly. Felix remarked that he was very surprised to learn that one of the escorts held the same rank as him, a lieutenant, and was quite young. Felix's expression turned grim as he reflected on the encounter. He had sensed an abnormal scent of blood and a lingering sense of killing radiating from the young girl. To him, it felt as if the very embodiment of death had been standing right in front of him. He realized with dread that this girl, Olivia, might very well become a serious threat to the Empire. 1 month later, the political landscape had shifted. The coalition army returned to Fort Gallia, while Lieutenant Elman and 8,000 troops remained to garrison the newly recaptured Fort Casper. General Lambert and Colonel Neinhardt continued on to the capital to deliver their report. Meanwhile, at Fort Gallia, Claudia knocked on a door. Olivia's voice called out for her to enter before Claudia had even announced herself. Claudia stepped inside to find Olivia lying on the floor, surrounded by a messy pile of books. Claudia wondered how Olivia knew it was her, but Olivia simply pointed out that Claudia was making a funny face. Flustered, Claudia rubbed her cheeks, realizing she had let her guard down and relaxed her expression without noticing. Regaining her composure, Claudia announced that she had good news and told Olivia not to be too surprised when she heard it. Claudia burst into the room with excitement, holding up a document that bore the grand crest of 2 lions. She announced to Olivia that she had been awarded the Medal of the Golden Lion, a prestigious honor. Olivia, lying amidst her books, stared blankly at the news and simply replied, "Well." Claudia chuckled, noting that she somehow knew Olivia wouldn't be surprised anyway. When Olivia's reaction remained flat, Claudia laughed again, "Foo-foo," and leaned in with a mischievous grin, telling her that she was only saying that now because she hadn't heard the rest of the news yet, implying there was a significant catch or detail she was about to drop on her unsuspecting commander. Claudia burst into the room, completely unable to contain her excitement, and announced that Lieutenant Olivia had been awarded the Medal of the Golden Lion. Instead of celebrating, Olivia merely hummed and asked if that was it, casually rolling on the floor while Claudia desperately tried to make her grasp the magnitude of the honor. Claudia explained that it was an award of the highest order, bestowed upon only 3 individuals in all of recorded history. She detailed the legendary past recipients: Chief of Staff Leonhard Valk, who purged deep-rooted corruption and saved the declining kingdom; Major General Tristan Winsome, who single-handedly suppressed a massive 20,000-strong rebellion with a mere 2,000 men; and the invincible General Cornelius Wim Gruning, who dominated the battlefields during the Warring Kingdoms era. By accepting this medal, Olivia would be joining the pantheon of these revered figures as the very first female recipient in history, effectively marking the birth of a new hero of the kingdom. Despite the monumental prestige, Olivia's priorities remained stubbornly simple. She flatly stated that, as she had mentioned before, she would much rather be given books or delicious food instead of honor and medals. Exasperated but smiling, Claudia shifted her attention to the book Olivia was flipping through and noticed an illustration of a character named Comet, the mischievous elf. When Claudia asked if she was fond of the character, Olivia's eyes lit up. She explained that she found it fascinating how Comet tries so hard to play pranks on humans, despite being terrified of them. Claudia, blushing slightly, confessed that she wasn't trying to boast, but she actually owned every single book in the series. Olivia was absolutely thrilled by this shared interest, but then casually dropped another bombshell. She genuinely believed Comet existed in real life and had even tried various methods to catch him in the past. The scene perfectly encapsulated the vast gap between Olivia's legendary history-making military status and her delightfully eccentric, fantasy-loving personality. To Olivia's shock and delight, Claudia revealed that she had also tried to catch Comet, or at least owned every book in the series. Seeing Olivia's face light up with pure joy, Claudia offered to give her the books she had at home. She noted that as a noble, gifting her 100 or 200 books was no trouble at all. Olivia was overjoyed, realizing there were over 20 books in the series she didn't have. She happily declared that Claudia is like Ashton, and that they are both good humans, planning to have Ashton help clean up the mess and write home to have the new book sent. Once the book transaction was settled, Claudia shifted the topic to the award ceremony. She asked if Olivia had a ceremonial uniform. Olivia cheerfully said no and asked if she could just wear her standard military uniform. Claudia sternly informed her that a ceremonial uniform was required and that unfortunately, she could not attend without one. Olivia immediately tried to back out, saying she just wouldn't go. Claudia, however, was ready for this. She grabbed Olivia, threateningly asking what would happen if the guest of honor wasn't present. As Olivia stammered in fear, Claudia revealed she had anticipated this exact scenario and had brought a spare ceremonial uniform with her. Claudia helps Olivia try on the ceremonial uniform she brought for the upcoming award ceremony, since they are roughly the same height. Claudia is pleased to find that the length fits perfectly. However, Olivia complains that the chest area feels uncomfortably tight while the pants are too loose. When she asks about getting it adjusted, Claudia is horrified to realize that there are no tailors at the fort to make alterations, leading to a panicked moment as she realizes she may have to handle the adjustments herself. The scene then flashes back to the day Olivia first joined the Kingdom Army. She approached Colonel Otto and other officers, presenting a snake as a gift. When Otto asked why she was volunteering for the inferior Kingdom Army during such a chaotic war, Olivia cheerfully explained that her true objective was simply to find Zed, whom the humans call the God of Death. The officers were left baffled by her absurd explanation, unaware that her motivations were entirely personal and disconnected from the politics of the war. The scene shifts to the main reception hall in Fort Gallia, setting the context that the kingdom's situation in the war was hanging by a thread, leaving the army with no choice but to accept anyone capable of fighting the Imperials, regardless of their background. Inside the hall, General Paul prepares to commence the award ceremony. As Claudia stands nervously beside him, Paul reflects on his initial skepticism when he first heard that a girl the same age as his granddaughter had joined as a warrant officer. He admits he originally believed a battlefield was no place for a child, no matter how skilled, but quickly realized his worries about Olivia were completely unnecessary. In less than a year, Olivia had transformed from a questionable recruit into the silver-haired war maiden, a national hero lauded for her incredible feats. As she walks toward the ceremony in her ceremonial uniform, she looks calm and dignified. The government officials, who had only heard rumors and likely expected someone more imposing, are left murmuring in astonishment at her actual appearance. Colonel Otto observes this reaction, noting that the official's surprise mirrors his own initial expectations, as they probably imagined a fierce monster rather than the young girl before them. The award ceremony commenced in the Grand Hall of Fort Gallia. As Olivia approached the dais where General Paul and Colonel Otto stood, Otto sweated nervously, fearing that Olivia wouldn't know the proper etiquette for such a formal occasion and that they would have to overlook any missteps. However, Olivia moved with grace, kneeling perfectly before the general. The crowd murmured in admiration at her elegant demeanor. In the background, a chibi Otto shook in disbelief, realizing he hadn't taught her any of this, and assumed Warrant Officer Claudia must have been the one to instruct her. Claudia, meanwhile, looked on in a daze, equally surprised. General Paul addressed Olivia, stating that in recognition of her outstanding achievements, he would bestow upon her the Medal of the Golden Lion. Olivia responded with flawless formality, expressing that she was deeply honored to receive the distinguished award. Paul pinned the ornate medal, featuring winged lions, onto her chest. Olivia accepted it solemnly with both hands, looking every bit the national hero she had become. Just as the ceremony reached its climax and the attendees looked on in awe, the heavy doors at the back of the hall burst open. A soldier sprinted down the aisle, shouting a pardon for the intrusion. Otto angrily demanded to know why the interruption couldn't wait during a ceremony, but Paul calmly ordered him to let the soldier speak. The soldier announced an emergency report from the capital, bringing a sudden and serious end to the celebration. The award ceremony is abruptly interrupted by a soldier bursting in with urgent news from the Northern Front. The 3rd and 4th armies have been completely annihilated. The scene shifts to the Central Front, where Lieutenant General Brad Enfield, commander of the 2nd Army, receives the report. He is already struggling to hold the Central Front, and the news implies that the victorious Imperial troops from the north will soon be heading his way, threatening to surround his forces. Realizing that his superiors are asking the impossible and effectively sentencing his army to death, Brad cynically considers deserting. His adjutant, Captain Reese, tries to calm him down, acknowledging that the situation is strategically impossible, but pleads with him to at least hide his contempt for the High Command's orders. Reese delivered even more shocking news reports stated that at the Iris Plains, the 7th Army had completely crushed an Imperial force of 50,000 men. Furthermore, they had successfully retaken Fort Casper. Brad was momentarily stunned, asking if it was true, but as the reality set in, his despair vanished. He burst into laughter, slapping his head and shouting that he knew Old Man Paul could do it, proving that the title, Demon of the Battlefield, was more than just a name. Realizing the magnitude of the victory, Brad immediately called for a map of the kingdom's southern regions. He spread it out and studied the terrain, his mind already racing with new possibilities. He realized that if they extended their defensive line to connect with the newly secured southern territories, the strategic situation would change completely. With a confident smirk, he declared that with this new development, they finally had a chance to turn the tide. Following the devastating news that the 3rd and 4th Armies were annihilated at the northern front, a royal decree is issued at Fort Gallia. In response, the 7th Army is ordered to launch a counter-attack against the Imperial forces in the northern region. This victory triggers a wave of promotions within the ranks. Commanding Officer Paul is promoted to General. Olivia receives a massive 3-rank promotion, jumping from 2nd Lieutenant to Major. Claudia is promoted to 1st Lieutenant, and Ashton is granted a special accelerated promotion from Private to Warrant Officer. Meanwhile, at the Central Front, Lieutenant General Brad Enfield of the 2nd Army is analyzing the strategic situation. He realizes that the recapture of Fort Casper has shackled the 7th Army. Brad explains the geography of Fort Casper to his adjutant, Captain Reese. The fort is surrounded by rivers acting as moats to the east and west, and steep cliffs to the south. This terrain makes it a natural fortress that is difficult for large forces to attack. Brad deduces that the defensive specialist, Lieutenant Elman, can hold Fort Casper with a relatively small force of 10,000 soldiers, even if outnumbered. This means the southern region will remain secure without the main bulk of the 7th Army. Consequently, the 7th Army is no longer tied down to Fort Gallia and is free to move north to assist in the counter-attack against the Empire. Brad Enfield, realizing that the recapture of Fort Casper has freed up the 7th Army to move north, decides to call for the 1st Army instead. He reasons that he doesn't want to owe a favor to Old Man Paul, whom he finds scary, and knows King Alphonse would never allow the 7th Army to stay put with the Empire threatening the capital. Meanwhile, a strategy meeting is held at the capital. Major General Hosmund Chrysler passionately argues that they must take the initiative immediately with 3,000 troops to save the 2nd Army from annihilation. General Paul, sitting calmly, opposes this, stating he sees no purpose in intentionally dividing their forces. When Hosmund asks for input, Paul turns to Olivia, who is busy asking for more sugar for her tea. Suddenly Ashton, trembling with fear, stands up and shouts that he does not believe there is a need to make the first move. The room goes silent in shock. Hosmund, incredulous that a warrant officer would contradict a major general, challenges Ashton. He references Ashton's unprecedented and magnificent tactics at Fort Casper and demands that the terrified young man explain his reasoning for opposing the proposal. Ashton, trembling slightly but standing his ground, laid out his theory to the room full of high-ranking officers. He proposed that the Imperial forces in the northern region were specifically waiting for the deployment of the 7th Army. Therefore, he argued that hastily moving out to reinforce the north was unnecessary and likely dangerous. He was essentially calling the enemy's rapid victory a lure, suggesting that rushing to the aid of the 2nd Army would play right into the Empire's hands. The strategy meeting concluded with Ashton's warning falling on deaf ears. Despite his nervous attempt to explain that the Imperial forces in the north were likely lying in wait specifically to lure out the 7th Army, his argument was summarily rejected. Major General Hosmund, confident and eager for glory, dismissed the young strategist's audacious thinking. Consequently, Hosmund's proposal was accepted, and the very next day, he departed for Emir, the largest fortified city in the northern region, leading a force of 3,000 cavalry. In the aftermath, promotions and new orders were handed out. Lieutenant Elman, despite his common birth, was promoted to Lieutenant General for his success on the left flank at Iris Plains. Meanwhile, Colonel Otto fumed in frustration, having missed the decisive moments at both Iris Plains and Fort Casper. He was desperate to prove his worth and refused to be left behind again. It was decided that Major Olivia and a regiment of cavalry would deploy as a second battle group in a week, with the main force following the week after that. Later, Claudia found Olivia looking depressed in the archives, muttering about being unable to find any clues. Seeing her commander so down, Claudia dragged her off to the cafeteria for lunch. There they ran into Ashton. Claudia immediately confronted him about his theory from the meeting, that the enemy was luring the 7th Army into a trap, noting that everyone had thought he was delusional. Ashton admitted he truly believed it at the time but accepted their judgment. However, Olivia, with her mouth full of food, mumbled that she didn't think it was delusional. After Claudia scolded her for speaking while eating, Olivia swallowed and clarified her statement. "I didn't think what Ashton said was delusional." This left Claudia stunned, realizing that if Olivia agreed, there might actually be enemy reinforcements waiting for them. In the cafeteria, Claudia presses Olivia for an explanation regarding the strategy meeting. She asks why Olivia didn't voice her agreement with Ashton's theory during the actual discussion. Olivia calmly explains that the timing of the 3rd and 4th Army's annihilation, just 2 months after the kingdom retook Fort Casper, seemed too convenient. She believes the Empire destroyed those armies, specifically in response to the 7th Army retaking the southern regions, meaning they are indeed lying in wait. However, when Claudia asks why she didn't say this at the time, the truth comes out: Olivia was simply preoccupied with her tea and didn't feel like it. Claudia is left speechless and exasperated by her commander's priorities. Ashton, sitting nearby, reflects on the meeting. He admits his statement was unexpected and lacked conclusive evidence, which is likely why the Major Olivia didn't intervene to support him more forcefully. He tries to brush off the rejection of his idea as natural, but this passivity only annoys Claudia further. She snaps at him, reminding him that Colonel specifically asked for his opinion, implying he should have defended his strategic insight more vigorously. Olivia laughs at Ashton getting scolded, treating him almost like a misbehaving little brother despite him being 4 years older. Claudia apologizes for her outburst but tells Ashton he needs to face these situations with more conviction next time. She then turns to Olivia, telling her she shouldn't be laughing either. Suddenly, the mood shifts as Claudia announces with a bright smile that today is the day they will finally decide on Olivia's house name. Olivia is horrified, recalling that the first time Claudia brought this up, she had to run away for 2 hours, and the second time, it took 4 hours for Claudia to find her. She protests that she doesn't need a house name and never asked to be a noble. Claudia insists that since Olivia was appointed as a Knight of the Kingdom, being granted a noble title is a natural progression, ignoring Olivia's desperate attempts to decline. In the cafeteria, Ashton, trembling at the mere thought of Colonel strictness, advises Olivia that she should just do as Claudia says. Resigned, Olivia nods and agrees to go to Claudia's room to look at the list of extinct noble families. Upon entering Claudia's quarters, Olivia is surprised to find it sparkling clean, noting that it is completely different from her own messy room. Claudia explains that she mainly uses the room just for sleeping. As Claudia retrieves the heavy book of lineage, Olivia immediately flops onto the bed and starts snuggling into the blankets, claiming she is sleepy because she just ate. Claudia tries to scold her for being selfish and urges her to decide quickly. Olivia, trying to procrastinate, suggests playing a game of tag or hide and seek instead, but Claudia firmly refuses. While Claudia stands by, Olivia lazily flips through the pages of the book. Suddenly, she stops. Her eyes lock onto a specific emblem on the page, a skull with a diamond on its forehead, draped in tattered black cloth. As Claudia leans in, asking which one she found with a bright smile, Olivia stares at the symbol with a serious, shocked expression, realizing it might be a clue related to her past. Olivia staring intently at a page in the Book of Extinct Noble Houses. She has found an entry for the House of Valetstorm, which ended over 150 years ago in the year 8040 of the solar calendar. Claudia notes that it is odd that the cause of the house's demise is not recorded, which is unusual for noble records. Suddenly, Olivia declares that she has decided. This will be my house name. Claudia is horrified, flipping through the book to show her other options and pointing out that the Valetstorm emblem, a skull with a diamond on its forehead, is incredibly eerie. Olivia, however, is resolute. She ignores Claudia's protests and formally announces, "From now on, I will be Olivia Valetstorm." After making her decision, Olivia asks if they can look into why the house ended. Claudia suggests that they search the royal library in the capital. She explains that the Furnace Kingdom is the oldest on the continent and that its royal library stores the records of the entire kingdom's history. Upon hearing that the entire history is stored there, Olivia's expression shifts. Her eyes well up slightly, and she looks deeply moved. Realizing that such a place might hold the answers she has been searching for regarding her past and Zed. Claudia asks if something is wrong, snapping Olivia out of her trance. Olivia quickly apologizes and changes the subject, remembering that Adjutant Otto wanted her to hurry up and decide on a name. Claudia tries to stop Olivia from reporting her decision to Colonel Otto, realizing too late that choosing the ominous House of Valetstorm was a terrible idea. She protests that the name is too sinister, but Olivia, fixated on her choice, brushes her off. In a burst of energy, Olivia shoves past her subordinate, locking the door to Claudia's own room from the inside to ensure she isn't interrupted. Left standing in the hallway, a confused and exasperated Claudia can only tap on the door, realizing she has lost control of the situation completely. Inside the room, Olivia's demeanor shifts. She pulls out a pendant containing a brilliant red jewel, a memento left behind with her jet black sword. Flipping back to the page in the book, she compares the jewel to the crest of House Valetstorm. The diamond shape of the jewel matches the diamond embedded in the forehead of the skull on the family crest perfectly. Realizing that the shape and color are exactly the same, Olivia bursts into triumphant laughter. She has finally found a concrete clue about her past and the person she is searching for. Clutching the book, she cheers, "Wait for me, Zed." Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Imperial Army's perspective at Castle Windsam. Colonel Gaul Nurath, adjutant to General Rosemary, reads reports with a look of disdain. He comments on the spinelessness of the local feudal lords, who immediately began groveling and offering up their castles to the Empire the moment news broke of the kingdom's defeat at the Northern Front. He finds it hard to believe this is the same Kingdom of Lions. They feared, disgusted by how easily the nobles surrendered their dignity along with their lands. At Castle Windsam, General Rosemary reflects on the kingdom's weakness, noting that while the surface looks splendid, its roots are rotten. She dismisses the cowardice of the feudal lords who surrendered immediately, but turns her attention to the 7th Army. She asks Colonel Nurath for reports on the movements of the force that killed General Oswan, mentioning intelligence from the Flame of Dawn. Nurath reports that there are widespread rumors within the 7th Army of a girl worthy of being called a monster. He explains that soldiers returned during the prisoner exchange all describe the same thing, a monster in the guise of a beautiful girl. He recounts tales of how swords do not pierce her, arrows do not reach her, and no one who stands in her way survives to tell the tale. Nurath admits that while dramatic stories born of fear are common, the volume of consistent reports this time is unusually high. He notes that thousands of soldiers are terrified of this single girl, and many have even gone mad from fear. He concludes that this is not something they can simply dismiss as a delusion. Rosemary laughs at the description. She reveals that she has recently obtained a new weapon. Holding up a jagged, dark blade, she declares that no matter if the opponent is a monster or not, she will make them pay for killing General Oswan. The narration states that there is only one person the sword points toward. The Imperial Army's Castle Windsam, General Rosemary von Berlinetta examines a mysterious weapon she recently received from General Felix. It is a steel sword that, when drawn, is dyed a deep red as if radiating heat. Rosemary isn't entirely sure of its origins, noting it might be a mystical weapon created by the goddess of magic, but she is certain of one thing: Felix gave it to her. The blade is tainted with an evil aura, and it is said that anyone cut by it will suffer anguish worse than hell. Rosemary is confident that this sword can kill even a so-called monster, her mind fixated on avenging General Oswan and destroying the kingdom's 7th Army. Prime Minister d'Armes attempts to rein in her bloodlust, reminding her of her immense responsibilities not just as the head of the Crimson Knights, but as one of the Empire's 3 generals. Rosemary snaps back, asking why he thinks she is handling bureaucratic affairs if not for her duties. She then outlines a ruthless political strategy for governing the newly conquered northern regions. Her plan involves allowing the feudal lords who surrendered to stay in power as puppets. However, the Empire will enact oppressive policies in the name of those lords. Eventually, when the hatred of the oppressed population boils over and they kill their former rulers, the Empire will step in to restore order and officially take jurisdiction. d'Armes is left speechless and impressed. He realizes that while Rosemary is praised for her might on the battlefield, she also possesses a cunning talent for politics that he had underestimated. d'Armes reflects on the situation, acknowledging that controlling the entire northern region will take time, and he needs to keep the general focused on strengthening their position. However, he knows they cannot afford to be complacent. They must thoroughly prepare before engaging the kingdom's 7th Army, for their opponent possesses a girl worthy of being called a monster. The narrative flashes back to a memory from Olivia's childhood, showing a young Olivia sitting by a campfire happily gnawing on roasted bird meat. She asks her companion, the shadowy entity Zed, why he isn't eating. Zed explains that he is fundamentally different from humans. While he can taste physical things, eating food does not satisfy him. When the young Olivia innocently asks what he normally eats, Zed reveals that he consumes human souls. Unfazed by this grim revelation, Olivia simply asks if souls are yummy. Zed elaborates that the flavor depends on the quality, specifically the otic force, within a human. He complains that the level of otic force in current humans is extremely low, making their souls unappetizing. He attributes this decline to the rapid advancement of human civilization, which has increased life expectancy and meant that humans no longer die for simple reasons. As a result, he hasn't been able to find any souls of good quality lately. Olivia reflects on the lessons Zed taught her during these times. She recalls him explaining that when a physical body loses the ability to move, the human soul lives on for a brief moment, colored by the traces of the life the person once lived. This knowledge made her realize that learning was important. Curious about his methods, Olivia asks if Zed kills humans to eat their souls. Zed denies this, stating that he generally does not kill humans and can only involve himself with those who have just died or those without a sense of self, such as infants. He admits that while he could kill an infant to eat their soul, it isn't worth it for such a tiny amount of sustenance. Olivia simplifies this logic, concluding that he just can't fill his tummy that way. This flashback highlights the unique and detached worldview Olivia developed under the tutelage of the God of Death. The flashback continues, revealing the origins of Olivia's unique worldview. Sitting by the fire, a young Olivia cheerfully offers to solve Zed's hunger problem. Noting that he is having trouble finding souls to eat, she brightly suggests, "How about I kill humans and bring them back to you?" She innocently wonders how many people she would need to kill to fill his tummy. Maybe 10 or perhaps 20. Zed falls silent. He observes that Olivia is someone truly worthy of observation, because despite her young age, she hasn't thought about the morality of killing humans, even once. He then asks if she wants to return to the human world for a while. Olivia agrees, not out of a desire for society, but because she wants to try the bread and sweets she has read about in books. Zed advises her that once she returns, she needs to increase the variety of food she eats, specifically vegetables, because she is reaching adolescence. When Olivia asks what that is, Zed explains that her bones will grow and her body will become bigger, warning that an unbalanced diet will hinder her development. Impressed by his vast knowledge, Olivia exclaims, "Zed, you really know everything!" Zed replies with a hint of melancholy, explaining that his knowledge comes from the fact that he has lived by idly for an eternity. Olivia wakes from a dream of her childhood with Zed, realizing with a start that she has overslept and missed breakfast. When Claudia knocks on her door, Olivia cheerfully demands 10 egg sandwiches with special mustard to make up for the lost meal. After getting ready, she meets Claudia, and they head to the parade grounds where the troops are scheduled to gather. 2 hours later, a massive formation of soldiers stands at attention. This is the newly formed Special Cavalry Regiment, a force of 3,000 soldiers composed of veterans from the former Special Brigade mixed with fresh recruits. A unique aspect of this regiment is the immense discretionary power granted to its commander, Olivia, a gift from General Paul. As Olivia stands before the troops, the soldiers whisper amongst themselves. While many are struck by her beauty, others are filled with doubt and anxiety. They question how a young girl can be their commander and wonder if she is even human. Claudia observes this discord, noting that the soldiers are skeptical of such a young commander. Olivia calls for attention to begin the briefing. Instead of a standard inspirational speech, she stares at them with intense eyes and bluntly declares, "Humans die easily in war," leaving the soldiers stunned by her grim and direct assessment of their future. Olivia addressing her newly formed Special Cavalry Regiment. Standing before the 3,000 soldiers, a mix of veterans from her old Special Brigade and fresh recruits, she delivers a unique motivational speech. Instead of talking about glory or duty, she tells them that if they die, they won't be able to eat yummy food or sweets. She promises that she, along with Claudia and Ashton, will devise strategies to ensure everyone survives so they can enjoy the food of tomorrow. The soldiers, initially stunned by her bluntness, are deeply moved by her care for their lives, shouting that the silver-haired war maiden has touched their hearts. Claudia, flustered, clarifies that Olivia means they will fight with the highest chance of survival. Energized, the regiment mounts their horses and prepares to deploy to the fortified city of Emir. As they stand ready, Olivia is presented with a choice of 2 routes: Route 1 cross the Est Mountain Range and pass through the royal capital Fizz. Route 20 head north from the town of Canary and travel along the edges of the desert. A soldier points out that Major General Oswan and his cavalry have already taken the first route through the royal capital, implying they might take the other path. However, Olivia enthusiastically declares that the Special Cavalry Regiment will also be taking the route that stays overnight at the royal capital. This decision leaves Claudia and Ashton confused, indicated by their shame, likely wondering why they are following the same path, or perhaps suspecting Olivia's true motive is to visit the capital for its food and sweets. Olivia reveals a strategic divergence in their deployment plans. She announces that the Special Cavalry Regiment's path heading east will not actually take them to the royal capital. She explains that while the first battle group's objective is haste, the second battle group's mission is intelligence gathering and searching for the enemy. Therefore, in order to grasp the movements of the Imperial armies over a wider area, she argues that it would be pointless for them to simply follow the same route as the first battle group. This sudden shift in logic leaves Claudia and Ashton stunned and confused. As the Special Cavalry Regiment marches east, the atmosphere is dampened by Major Olivia's foul mood. Claudia attempts to cheer her up by pointing out the blooming flowers, but Olivia remains sulking. Claudia and Ashton urge her to reconsider her attitude, warning that her gloominess is negatively affecting the morale of the soldiers. Olivia protests, arguing that she was given discretionary power as the regimental commander. But Claudia firmly reminds her that even a commander cannot change strategic routes for personal reasons. The root of Olivia's frustration is finally revealed. She wanted to go to the royal capital to visit the royal library. She hopes to find information about her past and the House of Validstorm. Claudia explains why this is impossible. First, the procedural paperwork to enter the library takes 2 days, which they don't have. Second, entry requires a letter of recommendation from a high-standing noble house. When Olivia points out that she is now a noble, Claudia explains the nuance of the situation. Simply holding a title isn't enough. One needs established standing as a noble, which cannot be obtained overnight. Furthermore, Olivia's unknown origins and lack of lineage make it difficult for her to gain access to such a restricted facility. Despite her new rank, the bureaucratic hurdles and her mysterious background still bar her from the answers she seeks. Recalls that Zed found her as a baby in a deep forest near a temple called the Gate of the Underworld, located in the unknown regions. Claudia finds this childhood story far-fetched, but acknowledges that regardless of Olivia's battlefield heroics, she currently lacks the noble standing required for entry. Claudia admits that even her own family, the Jung household, is merely a noble house on the fringes of the kingdom and might not be enough to guarantee entry. When Olivia asks if there is anyone who could get in without issues, she imagines a decorated, popular, good family individual. Claudia then suggests Brigadier General Neinhardt. She reminds Olivia that Neinhardt visited them previously to express gratitude for Olivia killing Samuel of the Violent Thrust, thereby avenging Neinhardt's best friend. Olivia vaguely remembers him as the human who was badly imitating a fish, a description that makes Ashton burst out laughing. Claudia explains that Neinhardt feels a deep debt of gratitude because he had wanted to avenge his friend himself. Olivia also recalls that he gave her sweet fruit called peaches. Realizing that she needs to complete their current mission before she can call in this favor, Olivia's morale instantly returns. She shouts, "Let's go!" with renewed energy, eager to finish the job so she can eventually get the recommendation she needs. Ashton praises Claudia for skillfully managing the major's mood, and the Special Cavalry Regiment marches on. The group rides through a town that is still in ruins, with Ashton noting that recovery efforts haven't progressed and the air smells of rot. Upon arriving at the military garrison, they are immediately swarmed by local children who are starstruck by Olivia's appearance. One child compares her to a doll, while another boldly sniffs her, remarking that she smells super good. The child reveals he is holding a cookie, a treat Olivia eagerly eats. The children are shocked, explaining that cookies are food for rich nobles and they have never had one. This leads Olivia to ask Ashton, a fellow commoner, if he has eaten cookies before. Ashton explains that while they are luxury items, his family is a fairly large merchant family, so he has had the opportunity to eat them. Unlike the local children, Olivia generously offers her cookies to the impoverished children who are initially hesitant because they have no money. She insists they eat, noting they are super yummy. The children devour the treats, shouting, "Big sis!" and praising the taste. Ashton asks Olivia how many cookies she has left, and she replies, "About 10. He then points out a group of 10 other children nearby and suggests she give them some too. Olivia does the mental math, 10 minus 10 equals 0, and realizes she is about to lose her entire stash. She panics and cries out that she will be the sad one with no cookies, calling Ashton a demon. and a fiend for his suggestion. To console her, Ashton leans in and whispers a secret. There is a hidden cake shop in the royal capital where the cakes are so delicious that one bite will make you unsatisfied with any other cake forever. Intrigued by the promise of such a treat, Olivia's mood shifts as she contemplates the legendary dessert. Ashton confirms the rumors, stating that the shop has the most delicious cake. He swears on the Xenofielder family name that he will take her there. Overjoyed by the promise, Olivia declares that she will now hand out really yummy cookies to the children. She distributes her stash of cookies to the kids for free, earning their adoration. Ashton watches her, remarking on how thoughtful she is, while Claudia notes that every little bit of kindness helps the town of Canary recover. The next day, the group is having breakfast at a temporary lodging house when a soldier bursts in, desperate and out of breath. He introduces himself as Bernhard, a messenger from the 6th Army, and begs them to save Lieutenant General Sala. Olivia is confused by his presence, pointing out that the 6th Army is stationed in the central western region to defend Fort Pishita, far from their current location. Bernhard, the messenger, is clinging to Olivia's leg, begging for help. Claudia pulls him off, scolding him for his rudeness, and Bernhard apologizes before explaining the dire situation. The 6th Army is currently besieged by the Sworn Kingdom at Fort Pishita. Inside the besieged fort, Lieutenant General Sala San Revere stands on the ramparts, resigned to the fact that this is as far as we go. Her vice commander, Senior Colonel Roland, is frantic, yelling at the princess to get off the wall before she is hit by a stray arrow. He screams that if she falls, it will spell the end of the 6th Army. Roland orders bodyguards to stay by her side, calling her careless. Sala realizes he isn't praising her leadership, but is terrified because of her status as the 4th princess of the kingdom. Roland reveals they send a messenger to the 7th Army, but estimates it will take a week for help to arrive. Sala, remembering a previous defeat where they barely escaped the Imperial Army, doubts they will be lucky enough to hold out that long. Inside the besieged Fort Pishita, Lieutenant General Sala San Revere resigns herself to the grim reality of their situation. She suggests that if things get worse, they should simply surrender. Sala contemplates her value as a bargaining chip. Despite being an illegitimate child, her status as a princess might be enough to spare her soldiers if she hands herself over to the enemy. As the siege presses on, the narration emphasizes that they have only a little bit of time left. After bidding a cheerful farewell to the children of the town, Olivia leads her regiment away from Canary. However, shortly into their ride, she abruptly stops her horse, claiming she thought she saw rats scurrying about again. Though she dismisses the sighting and says she will crush them if they get too close, her mood has shifted. Olivia suddenly announces a change in their destination. Instead of following their original orders to head toward the northern front, she declares they are diverting to Fort Pishita to rescue the besieged 6th Army. Claudia is alarmed, pointing out on a map that this is a clear deviation from their orders. Olivia justifies her decision by recalling Ashton's earlier analysis. The main Imperial forces in the north are lying in wait specifically for the 7th Army to deploy. She reasons that as long as her force remains in this area, the enemy will not make a move. Confident that they cannot simply abandon their comrades to die, Olivia orders the march toward Fort Pishita. Ashton expresses uncertainty about his strategic analysis regarding the enemy's movements, admitting it's just his opinion and he doesn't know if it's right or wrong. Olivia laughs heartily at his self-doubt, playfully grabbing him and teasing him about being funny. Ashton, flustered, complains that despite his correct tactical instincts, he still can't beat her at shogi. Olivia offers him a piece of wisdom, explaining that while thinking is important, overthinking can cause one to lose sight of themselves. With the time for deliberation over, Olivia declares they are out of time and leads the cavalry forward, galloping through the forest toward their new destination. Unbeknownst to them, they are being watched from the trees by 2 Imperial soldiers from the intelligence unit, Mirage, Lieutenant Alvin and Sergeant Lester. Lester is stunned that Olivia seemed to realize they were watching from such a distance without even using a spyglass. Alvin dismisses it as a coincidence, but Lester insists it was too precise to be luck. Alvin chides his subordinate, reminding him that there are existences in the world beyond human comprehension, such as sorcerers, which is why Lester hasn't been promoted yet. He speculates that Olivia might be one of those anomalies, a being similar to a sorcerer or a monster, warning Lester not to try and make logical sense of everything. Lester, observing Olivia from the shadows, struggles to reconcile her innocent appearance with her reputation. He remarks that she looks like a girl who wouldn't hurt a fly, yet the kingdom wouldn't be foolish enough to appoint a mere child as a regimental commander. He connects her to the rumors from Fort Casper about an existence that rendered swords and arrows useless. Fairy tale. Monster responsible for the deaths of General Oswan and Lieutenant General George. Alvin, however, remains cautious. He admits he is still gathering the pieces of the puzzle and hasn't reported to General Rosemary yet. He reminds Lester that as the intelligence unit, Mirage, their duty is information gathering and analysis, not war. Internally, Alvin decides to withhold the full truth from Rosemary, fearing that her extreme hatred for the 7th Army would cause her to act rashly. Alvin issues new orders. Lester is to return immediately to General Rosemary and report that the 7th Army is heading toward the Central Front to join the main force rather than the North. He also instructs Lester to report that the leader might be the rumored monster. However, he strictly reiterates his previous command to leave out any mention of General Oswan's death to keep the general's temper in check. Alvin decides to stay behind with the remaining men to continue tracking Olivia, noting with concern that they have already lost contact with 2nd Lieutenant Xenon, one of their most skilled members, after he infiltrated Fort Gallia. The scene shifts to Castle Windsam, where Colonel Neroth delivers the report to General Rosemary. He informs her that Mirage has spotted the 7th Army's vanguard, about 3,000 troops, at the town of Canary. He adds that they are being led by a silver-haired girl who Mirage suspects might be the rumored monster, though they admit it is mere speculation without conclusive evidence. Rosemary listens to the report with a sinister, eager smile. Colonel Neroth delivers the report from the intelligence unit, Mirage, to General Rosemary. While she laughs at the confirmation that the monster is leading the 7th Army, she notes a strange development. Instead of heading north to reinforce the devastated northern regions, the army has turned and marched west. Her contemplation is interrupted by General Gladen, the general of the armies, who storms in and furiously berates her for interfering. Neroth warns Gladen that such outbursts could be used by political rivals to strip him of his title, but Gladen retorts that he doesn't care about his station. Gladen then reveals the truth behind the Western movement. He himself ordered the Sworn Kingdom to attack Fort Pashida, where the kingdom's 6th Army is stationed. Rosemary immediately connects the dots. She realizes the 7th Army's vanguard is heading west not to fight the Empire directly, but to rescue the besieged 6th Army. Gladen notes that if the vanguard is moving, the main kingdom army won't be far behind. Frustrated that Gladen has essentially snatched away her prey, Rosemary decides that for now the Imperial forces will do nothing. She resolves to wait and see if the rumored monster is strong enough to force the sworn forces to retreat, viewing the upcoming clash as a test of her target's abilities. General Rosemary hatched a cunning plan, deciding to dispatch Lieutenant Colonel Volmer as a measuring stick for the kingdom's monster. She reasoned that Volmer, who was itching for action, was the perfect tool to gauge Olivia's true strength. Her strategy was foolproof. If Volmer killed the girl, the rumors of a monster were proven false, and the Empire could crush the 7th Army without fear. However, if Volmer were defeated, Rosemary herself would lead the forces to crush Olivia personally. Meanwhile, inside the besieged Fort Pashida, the situation for the 6th Army was dire. In Lieutenant General Sala's private room, a maid fretted over the meager rations of hard bread and watery soup, lamenting that such food was unfit for a princess. Sala, lying in bed and looking visibly weak, dismissed the concern, her demeanor suggesting she had given up. Senior Colonel Roland entered the room and immediately saw through her facade. He knew Sala was refusing to eat, not out of a sense of royal pride, but because she intended for her portion to be given to the starving troops instead. Roland confronted the princess, stripping away her excuses. He bluntly stated that her refusal to eat was a form of suicide and a plan to hand herself over as a sacrifice to the enemy in exchange for her soldiers' lives. He reminded her that having served her for 10 years, he knew her heart too well to be fooled. Caught in her lie, Sala looked on in shock, clutching her dress as Roland's accusations hit the mark. Realizing she had been found out, she admitted that she saw no other choice to save everyone. Princess Sala San Revere notes that a week has passed since they sent messengers, and there has been no word from the 7th Army. Believing their gamble for reinforcements has failed, she resolves to sacrifice herself, hoping that her life might be enough to save her soldiers. Senior Colonel Roland protests, insisting they have not yet reached the breaking point, but Sala is resolute in her decision. Defeated by her determination, Roland reluctantly asks for his armor to be prepared, resolving to face the end alongside her. Sala, now dressed in a white gown, remarks on her appearance, stating that she could not face the House of Revere or the royal family in the afterlife if she were beheaded in an improper guise. She is determined to maintain her dignity as a princess until her final moment, unaware that the monster they have given up hope on is actually marching to their aid. The narrative shifts to the Sworn Army's rear guard, where 2nd Lieutenant Marzel is enjoying a meal. He and his men are in charge of logistics and have been relaxing, assuming the main army is holding the line at Fort Pesita. However, their complacency is shattered when a soldier rushes in with terrifying news the kingdom's 1st Army has surrounded them from the rear. Before the logistics unit can even mount a defense, they are met with a gruesome sight. The ground is littered with the bodies of their comrades. A soldier points in horror at a lone figure standing amidst the carnage. It is Olivia. She has single-handedly slaughtered the entire rear guard unit. As she stands there, blood on her sword and a faint smile on her face, Marzel is frozen in terror, realizing too late the sheer monster they are facing. The story continues with Olivia standing before the terrified sworn commander Marzel. Paralyzed by an overwhelming sense of dread, Marzel asks for her name. In stark contrast to his fear, Olivia smiles brightly and introduces herself cheerfully. She then makes a demand. She wants Marzel to take her directly to the main Sworn Army's command post to meet the commander-in-chief. Marzel's soldiers, realizing the sheer power disparity, immediately surrender and urge their commander to comply. Terrified and realizing she will not tolerate disobedience, Marzel agrees to lead her. Olivia strikes a bargain. In exchange for guiding her, she promises to spare the lives of all his men. She notes that the sworn soldiers seem honest and likely because they admitted they were mostly farmers pressed into service, and decides to use a disguise to avoid being recognized by the Farnest Kingdom, referencing a character called the Masked Knight Sharia from a book. Marzel leads the armored Olivia into the sworn main camp at Fort Pesita. He is immediately confronted by Marshal Ribral Latoria, who demands to know what he is doing. Marzel apologizes but insists that the existence of their kingdom is at stake and he had to deliver this report personally to ensure safety. Inside the armor, Olivia excitedly announces the arrival of the Masked Knight Sharia, before removing her helmet to reveal her identity. Olivia removing her helmet, revealing her face to the stunned sworn commanders. Marshal Ribral Latoria is bewildered, shouting at Marzel for spouting nonsense about a masked knight when the fate of their kingdom is at stake. Before Latoria can react further, Olivia has already closed the distance, holding her sword to his throat. Brigadier General Reinbach, the counselor, screams at Marzel, calling him a traitor and drawing his sword to attack. Olivia cheerfully interrupts the tension, introducing herself as Major Olivia Valetstorm from the Farnest Kingdom. She clarifies the situation. Marzel hasn't defected. She simply asked him to bring her to the main command post as fast as possible. She then strikes a dramatic pose, declaring herself to be the Masked Knight Sharia, a character from the book she reads. Marzel, sweating profusely, realizes the absurdity of the situation but knows it is too late to turn back. He seems to be internally panicking about the bad move of bringing such a dangerous individual into the heart of the enemy camp. Olivia, tilting her head innocently, asks if this is how humans think, noting that there are no shields anywhere to protect yourself. Latoria, terrified but trying to maintain command, screams at his soldiers to ignore him and get rid of the traitors. However, Reinbach freezes, looking at Olivia with dread and shouts, "I can't," realizing the futility of fighting the monster that just annihilated his rear guard, with a flashback explaining the dire situation of the Sworn Kingdom. 1 year prior, during the Battle of Sworn, the kingdom was defeated by the Empire. The former king and his ministers were executed, and a young puppet king, Alan, was installed. In reality, the country is controlled by Marshal Graydon of the Empire, who acts as the prime minister. A soldier pleads with Marshal Latoria, warning him that the young king relies on him and that losing this battle will plunge the kingdom further into darkness. Meanwhile, Olivia has successfully intimidated the sworn rear guard. She cheerfully notes their obedience and promises to release them if they retreat completely. The soldiers, terrified, agree to surrender their commander to her. Olivia flashes a menacing smile, warning them that if they try anything strange, she will kill them all. Inside Fort Pesita, Princess Sala is preparing to surrender to the enemy to save her soldiers, despite her vice, Commander Roland's desperate pleas to reconsider. Just as she steps out, a soldier rushes in shouting that the enemy is retreating. Sala is confused as they haven't inflicted any major losses. Looking out from the ramparts, she sees a new army approaching. Roland recognizes the banner with the lion and stars. It is the 7th Army of the Farnest Kingdom. Olivia rides at the head of the reinforcements, having forced the sworn army to withdraw. The sworn army, terrified by Olivia's display of power, begins a full retreat, saving the 6th Army from certain defeat. From the ramparts of Fort Lambert, Princess Sira watches the enemy flee, tears streaming down her face in relief and gratitude as she realizes they are saved. Olivia approaches the fort and formally introduces herself as Major Olivia Valetstorm of the 7th Independent Cavalry. However, she immediately breaks protocol by striking a dramatic pose and declaring herself Sharia the Masked Knight, a character from a book series. Her subordinate Claudia panics, scolding her for acting so informally in front of royalty. To everyone's surprise, Princess Sira is delighted. She reveals that she has been a fan of Masked Knight Sharia since she was a child, having read the books day and day. In fact, she even took up the sword because of the character. The two women instantly bond over their shared love for the fictional knight, shaking hands enthusiastically and leaving Claudia bewildered by the sudden friendship. Following the successful rescue of Fort Lambert, Olivia stands before the captured sworn commander-in-chief General Beryl. The general is furious, ranting that if Olivia hadn't appeared, his forces would have succeeded in their siege. Princess Sira, witnessing the scene, calmly interjects. She expresses her deep gratitude to Olivia, noting that normally, as a member of the royal family, she would be obligated to offer a reward. Instead, she agrees to Olivia's terms. The sworn army will be allowed to leave as they are, and General Beryl will be released once their complete withdrawal is confirmed. Before parting ways, the two girls share a moment of genuine connection. Olivia excitedly insists that they talk about Sharia, the Masked Knight, next time. Sarah, tears of relief and joy in her eyes, smiles and promises that they will meet again, clutching Olivia's hand. With the 6th Army safe, Olivia's unit rides out. Olivia announces their next destination, the desert city of Kefin. She explains to Ashton that because they detoured to save the 6th Army, they are now behind schedule. They need to hurry to Kefin to resupply on food and water and to gather new intelligence on the war situation. The Special Cavalry Regiment arrives at the desert city of Kefin, a historic trading post known for harvesting Stardust pieces. They are immediately welcomed by the captain of the guard, who, desperate for their protection, treats the entire regiment to meals at Meridia in the Desert, the finest restaurant in the city. For 3 days, the unit enjoys a brief respite, with Olivia indulging in the local fish and sweets, though Claudia constantly has to scold her for poor table manners. However, the mood in the city is tense. Ashton notes that the city is surprisingly empty for the harvest season. Claudia realizes that merchants, including the powerful Lloyd's Trading Company, are fleeing the region and the royal capital in fear of the advancing Imperial army. The locals are lavishing the regiment with hospitality, not just out of kindness, but out of necessity. With only 200 local guards, they are hoping the 3,000-strong cavalry will stay and defend them. Once their supplies are restocked and the scouts return, Olivia announces that they cannot stay forever and must depart for the fortified city of Mermaid the next morning to continue their mission. The royal army departs from the desert city of Kefin, waved off by grateful locals who thank them for their protection. As they walk, Ashton realizes that the luxurious accommodations were a nice touch, but then suddenly notices that Olivia is missing. Claudia wonders if the stress of choosing a house name previously caused her to develop a habit of running away. Despite her disappearance, neither Claudia nor Ashton is worried. They calmly assume she has simply wandered off and will return on her own once she gets hungry. Meanwhile, Olivia has not just wandered aimlessly. She stands atop a ruin, staring down a masked man who was tailing them. The man, sweating nervously, admits he knew she had noticed his presence, revealing himself to be a spy or assassin tracking their movements. Olivia confronts the masked spy, revealing that she had detected his presence not just in the present moment, but all the way back when they were at Fort Garia. She identifies his group as the Flying Rats and mentions Zen, causing the spy to realize with dread that his comrade has likely already been killed. The spy is shocked that she recognized their specific gear and realizes she is far more perceptive than anticipated. Olivia draws her sword, coldly stating that she finds them to be in a yes-sir, and suspects there are more of them hiding nearby. She delivers a chilling ultimatum. You can't just leave someone who has seen you, implying she intends to eliminate the witnesses. Realizing that negotiation is impossible and that they are facing a lethal threat, the spy abandons stealth. He screams an order to his hidden squad, Keel, and multiple assassins drop from the trees and rooftops, launching a coordinated ambush against Olivia in the dark. Olivia effortlessly dismantles the ambush, recalling Zed's teachings about never letting her guard down, even against attacks from above. She swiftly strikes down the assassin who tried to attack her from the sky, shocking the remaining enemies with her extraordinary leaping ability and swordsmanship. The leader of the assassins, realizing her skills are truly monster-like, admits they have no other words to describe her. He explains that his group, Kageru, prioritizes data gathering over combat and decides that fleeing is his only option. However, as he turns to escape, Olivia suddenly lunges at him with terrifying speed, striking him down while yelling for him to wipe the smile off his face. The assassin leader attempts a surprise attack on Olivia using a chain weapon, believing that since she dodged his initial strike, she wouldn't be able to handle a direct confrontation. He taunts her, suggesting she should have parried. However, Olivia catches the weapon mid-air with her bare hand, shattering the chain instantly. She critiques his technique, noting that his attacks are too aggressive and telegraphed, remarking that even sleeping birds would be able to dodge that. The assassin is left in shock, unable to comprehend how she sensed his attack coming from behind. Olivia effortlessly defeats him, leaving him sprawled on the ground in disbelief at her power. Meanwhile, back at the Hotel Silver Moon, Olivia's absence causes panic. Claudia is frantic, worried that something terrible has happened to her commander. Despite a staff member's attempts to calm her, Claudia drags Ashton along to go search for Olivia, rushing out of the hotel and alarming the other guests. Olivia returns to the hotel, cheerfully announcing her arrival while dragging a beaten assassin behind her. Claudia and Ashton are shocked, with Ashton noting the man is barely alive. Claudia frantically checks Olivia for injuries but realizes the blood covering her belongs to someone else. Olivia introduces the captive as Kageru of the Cutting Rats, which Claudia identifies as a legendary Imperial elite intelligence unit, realizing their fears of being spied on were correct. Olivia orders Ashton to tie Kageru up, leaving Claudia stunned and asking how she managed to capture such a dangerous spy. Claudia confronts Olivia, asking why she didn't reveal earlier that she knew they were being watched. Olivia admits she did mention it, referring to the spy as a rat in the gutter. This choice of words enrages Claudia, who yells at Olivia for her terminology. Olivia explains that while she initially planned to kill the entire spy unit, she realized halfway through that capturing one would allow them to gather valuable intelligence. To appease Claudia, Olivia decides to rename the captive from Gutter Rat to Fly. Just then, the spy Kageru groans and begins to wake up, prompting Ashton to alert the group. Kageru, bound and tied to a post, calmly acknowledges his situation, stating, "It seems like I've been caught." Standing before him, Olivia demands, "Now, let's hear your story," initiating the interrogation of the captured Imperial spy. The interrogation of captured Imperial spy begins. Kageru questions why Olivia spared his unit, labeling her a monster. When asked for his name, he attempts to bluff with the name Zoe, but Claudia instantly calls him out. She reveals that Olivia has Heaven's Gift Eyes, an ability to discern lies. Intimidated by this revelation, Kageru admits his real name is Alvin. Olivia then proposes a deal. If he answers her questions honestly, she will let him go. Alvin remains wary, skeptical that she truly intends to release him. The interrogation of the captured spy, Alvin, begins in earnest. When Olivia asks why the Empire is pursuing them, Alvin reveals that the Imperial High Command is furious over the 7th Army's recent successes, particularly the destruction of their southern forces at Fort Casper. He sneers that their commander has consolidated control of the north and ominously predicts that the entire 7th Army will be killed. Alvin's repeated use of the word monster to describe Olivia sparks immediate outrage. Claudia is furious, shouting that she can't let him speak that way about her commander, while Ashton also glares with anger. Olivia, however, remains completely unfazed. She smiles and cheerfully asks if he means a monster that is good at winning over human hearts, completely deflecting the insult. Suddenly, the usually mild-mannered Ashton makes a chilling suggestion. "Wouldn't it be better if we kill him right here, right now?" This unexpected ruthlessness catches Olivia off guard. She laughs, telling Ashton that such words don't suit him at all, and playfully draws her sword while saying, "Ah." The casual threat of execution terrifies Alvin, leaving him sweating and staring in shock at the unpredictable major. Olivia listens intently, her Heaven's Gift Eyes, confirming that every word he speaks is the truth. Satisfied, she signals for Ashton to cut the ropes. Alvin, trembling and confused, asks why she is letting him go after he revealed he was a spy. Alvin is stunned as he sits free from his bonds. He admits that he never expected Olivia to actually keep her word and release him. Olivia simply replies, "I already told you I keep my promises." However, her generosity comes with a request. She explains that she is actually more interested in sending a message to his commander. With a calm gaze, she asks Alvin if he understands and instructs him to deliver her words. And she said she will going to kill him herself, and she will slit his throat wide open and he should wait for her. Olivia turns to Ashton, praising him for being on point, regarding his earlier assessment that the enemy was waiting for them. When Ashton questions why she sent such a provocative message to the released spy, fearing it would only enrage their foes, Olivia reveals her true intent. She explains that since the enemy commander is seemingly obsessed with them, a taunt will force the Imperial forces in the north to clear out their uncertainties and advance toward the center. By provoking them, she forces the enemy to reveal their movements, turning a simple message into a powerful tool of war. Ashton is left in awe of her strategic depth, realizing she used provocation to gather intelligence. With the business concluded, Olivia's demeanor instantly shifts back to her usual self. Declaring that the fight has made her hungry, she demands dinner and specifically requests Ashton's special mustard bread, leaving the young strategist flustered but touched. Claudia, playing the role of the responsible aide, asks to borrow the inn's kitchen for Ashton but insists that Olivia change out of her blood-stained clothes so as not to disturb the other guests. The narrative then shifts its focus to the Imperial capital of Alstade. In the Imperial capital, a dark, swirling mist manifests before a hooded figure kneeling on the floor. The entity discusses the black sword wielded by the kingdom's forces, noting that the black haze it emits is not a form of magic. When the subordinate speaks, the entity lashes out, paralyzing him and scolding him for his insolence regarding humans. The entity commands the subordinate to use the power it was given to prolong the war, ordering them to lure as many people as possible to their deaths. It is revealed that the Emperor is merely a puppet under the entity's control, with no real power over the war. The entity speaks of an underworld grail, noting that a third of the fluids have already been poured in. It promises a soul-binding cursed potion to Akatsuki if they successfully fill the cup. Finally, the entity reveals its ultimate ambition to rule the continent of Debedrica for eternity, utilizing a drug linked to the Grim Reaper that turns humans into immortals. The story shifts focus to the true antagonist lurking in the shadows, the hooded figure Xenia. He stands in a dark room, consumed by an obsession to obtain the power of the Black Sword, regardless of whether it belongs to a Reaper or a demon. He reveals a chilling disregard for human life, stating that humans are born in swarms, and that he is willing to sacrifice tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people to achieve his goals. To him, a new empire built on countless corpses is exactly my kind of thing. The final pages reveal the twisted nature of his master plan. A vision shows Olivia standing atop a mountain of defeated foes, while Xenia smiles sinisterly. He explains that the war was actually on the verge of ending, but thanks to the girl the world calls a monster, the conflict is continuing. Far from being upset, Xenia is delighted. He views Olivia as an unwitting pawn who is prolonging the war to generate the necessary sacrifices for his ritual. He mockingly cheers her on, urging her to continue wielding your jet black sword with all your might, as her bloodlust and the resulting death pave the road to hell for his own gain. And the next morning, the captain of the guard in the desert town of Kafin is shocked to learn that Olivia's unit is departing so soon. Olivia reassures him that they have gathered the necessary intelligence and that the likelihood of an Imperial invasion in that specific area is now slim. With their supplies restocked and their intelligence gathered from the captured spy, the 7th Independent Cavalry Regiment sets off for their next objective, the walled city of Mermaid. Olivia notes that Major General Hosman's troops have already advanced to Mermaid as the first line of defense. She realizes that by choosing the route through the Imperial capital, Hosman has inadvertently drawn the enemy to that location, meaning the 7th Army won't need to hunt for the enemy. They will come to them. Meanwhile, at the walled city of Mermaid, the atmosphere is tense. Scouts report that the Imperial Army has been sighted just north of the Alm Plain. Inside the command post, officers debate their strategy. One suggests staying defensive within the city walls and waiting for the arrival of the Independent Cavalry Regiment's, Olivia's unit. However, the mood shifts drastically when the enemy vanguard is identified. The approaching force is the Order of Red, an elite Imperial Guard unit clad in crimson full-body armor. These knights are feared throughout the kingdom for having decimated the 3rd and 4th armies on the northern front. The sight of them strikes fear into the hearts of the officers. Despite the terror and the pleas of his subordinates to wait for reinforcements, the commander of Mermaid makes a bold decision. He notes that the enemy force is roughly 3,000 troops, the same number as his own garrison. Declaring that they are going all out, he orders his troops to sally forth and engage the enemy in the open field. He believes that if they can eliminate this elite, Red Knight unit, they will level the playing field for the rest of the war, ignoring the extreme danger of facing such a renowned force in a fair fight. The commander of the walled city of Mermaid, facing the dreaded Imperial Order of Red, makes a bold and risky decision. Despite his officers' terror and advice to remain defensive until reinforcements arrive, he orders a full sortie. He notes that the enemy force numbers around 3 others, the same as his own garrison, and argues that eliminating such an elite unit would level the playing field for the rest of the war. However, despite his orders to prepare for an all-out attack, the Imperial forces remain curiously stationary in the Alm Plain. Across the battlefield, the Imperial commander, Lieutenant Volmer, is growing impatient. Bored by the lack of engagement, he yells for someone to go knock on the city gates and pull out the monster. His second-in-command, Captain Lamia, cynically places a bounty of 5 gold coins on any soldier who can successfully lure this rumored monster out of the city. While Lamia doubts the kingdom will deploy their trump card so easily, the promise of gold excites the young, Russ's hot-blooded knights, prompting Volmer to chide Lamia for encouraging their recklessness. At the Imperial camp, Lieutenant Volmer is growing impatient with the stalemate. He confirms with Captain Lamia that the 7th Army has indeed entered the walled city of Mermaid. Volmer then goes on a tirade about his nickname, Champ Destroyer, denying that he loves killing people. Instead, he screams that he loves singing, which he describes as the act of playing with and smashing enemies with his battle axe. Lamia dryly points out that Volmer has just admitted to loving killing. Volmer then shifts his attention to their siege weapons, eager to test out new models by bombarding the city. However, a subordinate reminds him that Colonel Gaul ordered the city to be kept intact, as it is intended to serve as a base for the eventual invasion of the Imperial capital. Realizing that destroying the city is not an option, and that waiting is getting them nowhere, Volmer comes up with a new idea. Why don't we invite them over? The Imperial forces, commanded by the eccentric and bloodthirsty Lieutenant Volmer, remain camped outside the walled city of Mermaid. 2 days later, Olivia and her 7th Army are approaching Mermaid. Olivia is dozing on her horse, much to Claudia's chagrin, but perks up at the prospect of finding good food in the walled city. Suddenly, a lone rider approaches their ranks. The soldier, Private Rise from Major General Osman's forces inside the city, halts their advance and announces an emergency, confirming he has found the independent cavalry regiment. The narrative continues with a desperate messenger arriving at the 7th Army's position. Exhausted and frantic, he reports that Major General Osman's troops are currently engaging the Red Knights on the Alm Plains and are being overwhelmed. He begs for help before collapsing from exhaustion. Ashton and Claudia are alarmed by the news. Ashton urges immediate action to save their comrades before they are wiped out, while Claudia notes that the Order of Red Knights are formidable opponents. Olivia, however, stops them. She acknowledges the strength of the enemy and realizes that the raw recruits in her regiment would likely be slaughtered in a chaotic battle. Ashton panics, realizing they need a concrete survival strategy. When Olivia asks for a plan, Ashton admits he cannot formulate one quickly enough. Olivia briefly muses about going alone so she can do whatever she wants, but then devises a tactical solution. She announces her plan. Her troops will fight in groups of 3 to take down a single Red Knight. She explains a trinity formation consisting of 1 attacker, 1 defender, and 1 supporter. She believes this coordinated teamwork will give the inexperienced recruits a fighting chance against the elite knights. Olivia questions Claudia's hesitation regarding the trinity battle plan. Ashton explains the logic behind it by assigning specific roles, attacker, defender, supporter, to groups of 3. The inexperienced recruits can focus on a single task and have a fighting chance. However, Claudia remains deeply skeptical. She expresses her doubt that it is even possible for raw recruits to defeat a single Red Knight, citing her perspective as a knight who values and respects the strength of her enemies. Olivia bursts into laughter at Claudia's seriousness. She reminds her subordinate that this is war and the recruits are not knights yet, implying that honor and fair play are secondary to survival and victory. Playfully teasing Claudia for her rigid mindset, Olivia accepts the plan, saying, "Let's go with the plan." The narration notes that while Olivia finds Claudia's seriousness funny, Claudia is still internally struggling with the heavy decision of sending untrained soldiers against elite knights. The narrative takes a dark turn as Major General Osman's vanguard arrives at the Alm Plains. They are immediately confronted with a gruesome psychological warfare tactic: the mutilated corpses of soldiers, some dismembered or skinned, displayed as a warning. Despite the horror, the kingdom forces charge forward. Unaware, they are walking straight into Leltikanal Volmer's trap. The Order of Red ambushes them, and the battle is instantly one-sided. Volmer, wielding a massive battle axe, tears through the kingdom soldiers with terrifying speed and power. He slaughters a soldier named Selim and mocks the troops, laughing maniacally as he crushes their defenses. Disappointed by their weakness, he jeers at them, asking if this pathetic force is truly the legendary 7th Army that defeated the Imperial Southern Force. The battle at the Alm Plains has begun, and it is a massacre. Colonel Volmer and his elite Order of Red Knights are decimating Major General Osman's troops. Volmer is visibly disappointed, complaining that the kingdom soldiers are too weak, and lamenting that the monster girl, Olivia, is nowhere to be seen. A soldier from the 7th Army steps forward to confront Volmer. This soldier realizes Volmer's true target and reveals that Olivia is in a different squad, calling the current situation a complete misdirection. He declares that he will fight Volmer in place of Major General Osman. Frustrated by the absence of his desired opponent, Volmer turns his bloodlust toward the soldier. He mocks the soldier's weakness and declares that he will kill him to bring a souvenir. Back to General Rosemary. Volmer unleashes a devastating blow with his massive battle axe, sadistically demanding that the soldier scream for his major as he is crushed. The soldier is shown to be completely outmatched, struggling to even block the attack and realizing the terrifying power gap between them. Volmer revels in the violence, asking mockingly if this weak force is truly the same 7th Army that defeated the Imperial Southern Force. Olivia arrives on the battlefield just in the nick of time, saving a soldier from Leltikanal Volmer's devastating axe. The soldier, relieved, tries to salute her, but Olivia casually brushes it off, mentioning that while a Lieutenant Otto taught her the importance of saluting superiors, the current war zone situation takes precedence. Olivia immediately assumes command. She orders Major General Osman to stay put and retreat with a secure exit route that Claudia's squad has prepared. She insists that they cannot afford to let the Major General die, effectively taking the burden of the fight onto herself and her regiment. Volmer is delighted by her arrival. He had been frustrated by the lack of a worthy opponent, but seeing the monster girl makes his rush to the front lines worthwhile. Olivia's stomach growls loudly, reminding everyone she skipped lunch, but she declares she is all finished talking. She then seemingly kicks Volmer back or knocks him away with her presence of speed, apologizing for the sudden attack. Volmer, however, is thrilled. He laughs maniacally, saying it's been a long time since he was crashed to the ground like that. He is eager to fight the girl who defeated the Southern Force, ready to hear her sing a scream as he battles her. The narrative continues with the confrontation between Olivia and the Imperial commander, Leltikanal Volmer. Volmer observes Olivia, noting her reputation as a beautiful girl who has struck fear into thousands of soldiers, labeling her the monster girl famous in the Empire's armed forces. Olivia sighs, annoyed by the label, and corrects him, stating she is not a monster and her name is simply Olivia. Despite his earlier insult, Volmer politely introduces himself as Volmer Gangrit, remarking that even monsters have names. Olivia accepts this and formally introduces herself as Olivia Valadstorm. The pleasantries end abruptly as Volmer's bloodlust takes over. He raises his massive axe, ecstatic that his blood is finally boiling, and demands Olivia show him her singing skills. Her battle cries screams. The two clash weapons. Olivia blocks Volmer's heavy axe with her sword. While fighting, Olivia complains that she doesn't understand the fun of battle, worrying that if she dies, she won't be able to eat good food or sweets anymore. Volmer, however, is thrilled by her strength, laughing maniacally and shouting that she is the best. He launches a powerful follow-up attack, surprised by her toughness, which sends Olivia flying backward through the air. The battle between Olivia and Leltikanal Volmer intensifies. After being sent flying by Volmer's immense strength, Olivia lands safely, realizing that a normal person would have been crushed. Volmer is thrilled by her resilience, admitting he wasn't using his full power and declaring her amazing. Olivia, however, remains calm and analytical. She observes Volmer's physical strength and identifies him as a man with oddities, noting he is the second such person she has encountered, the first being Zed. As the fight progresses, Olivia's demeanor shifts from polite to coldly calculating. She thanks Volmer for the friendly chat, revealing in her internal monologue that she intends to use him as a meal to feed Zed. She views his defeat as a means to unlock Zed's power or gain his favor, thanking the bewildered Volmer for providing her with this opportunity. Meanwhile, the rest of the battle rages on the Alm Plain. The kingdom's forces are struggling against the elite Crimson Knights, who are attempting a pincer maneuver. Claudia takes charge of the 2nd Cavalry Company, fighting desperately to hold off the enemy and create a secure path for the wounded soldiers and Major General Oswan to retreat. In the heat of the combat, an enemy officer named Captain Lamia intercepts Claudia and asks if her reinforcements are led by the rumored silver-haired girl. The scene splits into 2 intense duels on the battlefield. On one flank, Claudia confronts the Imperial officer Lamia. After a brief exchange on horseback where Lamia deduces her connection to the silver-haired girl, Olivia, they clash swords. Lamia realizes they are evenly matched, and after a fierce exchange that seemingly knocks him from his saddle, he laughs and compliments her skill with a thumbs up, showing a strange, playful respect for her strength. Meanwhile, Olivia faces the monstrous LT, Colonel Volmer. Volmer is baffled by her earlier mention of a meal for Zed. As he questions her, he senses a shift in her aura. Olivia's expression darkens, and she prepares to unleash a devastating attack, her silhouette becoming menacing as she grips her sword, signaling the end of their conversation and the start of her true assault. The duel between Olivia and the Imperial Colonel Volmer intensifies. Volmer initially tries to psyche himself up, acknowledging that Olivia is a formidable foe with strength to withstand his attacks and speed like a jester. He reminds himself that General Rosemary appointed him specifically for this task, believing he is the only one capable of handling a monster like her. He boasts that while average soldiers couldn't touch her, he can counter her movements. However, the battle takes a sharp turn. As they clash weapons, Volmer exerts all his strength to push forward but finds himself completely unable to move. He is locked in place by Olivia's blade. Panic sets in as he realizes he is immobilized. Overwhelmed by anxiety and fear, Volmer comes to a terrifying realization he is not a match for her. The hunter has become the hunted. Olivia, maintaining a calm and eerie smile, declares that it is now her turn to attack. The battle between Olivia and LT, Colonel Volmer, ends in a brutal and one-sided display of power. Olivia effortlessly overpowers the massive commander, tossing his heavy body into the air with ease. She then proceeds to systematically dismantle him. First, she targets his right arm, severing it cleanly. Before Volmer can even process the injury, she vanishes and strikes again, slicing off his left arm. Panicked and unable to track her movements, Volmer screams in agony and confusion. Finally, Olivia delivers the finishing blows to his lower body, slicing off both his left and right legs. The once feared Red Knight is left a mutilated wreck on the ground, unable to think straight or move, completely neutralized by the girl he had underestimated. The battle reaches its gruesome conclusion as Colonel Volmer lies on the ground, completely mutilated with his limbs severed. In his delirious final moments, he looks up at the sky and hallucinates that Olivia is pure beauty, his mind breaking under the trauma. Olivia, maintaining her cheerful and unsettling demeanor, asks him, "How was it?" She coldly remarks that she was once turned into a limbless, Daruma, doll by a royal soldier when she first arrived in the kingdom, implying that she has simply subjected Volmer to the same fate he likely inflicted on others. Checking to see if he can still hear her, Olivia raises her black sword high into the air. She happily declares, "Have a nice meal, Zed," offering the defeated commander as a sacrifice to the entity residing within her blade. As a terrifying black haze begins to wrap around Volmer's body, consuming him, he realizes the horrific truth. He wasn't fighting a human, but a real monster. His final thoughts are filled with regret, realizing he should never have gone near her or touched her. The battle between Vice, Captain Lamia, and Claudia continues. Lamia, impressed by her combat skills, attempts to recruit her to the Empire, suggesting that the Farnest Kingdom has no future. Claudia firmly rejects his offer, stating she is proud to be a Knight of Farnest and would never switch sides just because she dislikes the enemy's flag. Calling her a fake knight for her stubbornness, Lamia attacks, but he finds himself unable to land a hit. He observes that Claudia's eyes are glowing slightly and realizes that while she lacks raw physical strength, her superior vision and spatial awareness allow her to dodge his attacks with ease, making her a difficult opponent to pin down. The battle between Vice Captain Claudia and the Imperial Vice Captain Lamia continues. However, Claudia quickly analyzes his swordsmanship, predicts his moves, and counters him, pinning him to the ground with her sword at his throat. She calmly declares, "I already won." Defeated, Lamia tries to get under her skin one last time. He taunts her, saying she will die soon anyway and calling her commander a rumored monster, hoping to disturb her mind with anger. Claudia reveals his first mistake. Her commander, Olivia, has already defeated the enemy Colonel and left for the underworld. Then, screaming that her second mistake was calling Olivia a monster when she is actually a hero, Claudia slits Lamia's throat, ending the duel. The battle reaches its climax as Claudia delivers the final blow to the Imperial Vice Captain Lamia, silencing his taunts about her monster. Commander. Simultaneously, the kingdom's troops realize that the formidable Commander Volmer has been defeated by Olivia. The battlefield erupts in cheers as the enemy leadership is decimated. Standing amidst the aftermath, Olivia looks up at the sky and wonders if the entity within her sword, Zed, has already received the offering she just provided, referring to the defeat of the enemy commander as a gift for him. Battle is far from over as a new Imperial commander, Captain Gordo Crisis, steps up to take command after the defeat of the previous leaders. He confronts Olivia, who has transformed her black sword into a massive scythe, evoking the image of the Grim Reaper from fairy tales. Gordo declares that he has realized the truth: Olivia isn't a monster, but the Grim Reaper itself. Olivia cheerfully corrects him, clarifying that Zed, the entity within her sword, is the Grim Reaper. However, the conversation is cut short as Olivia swiftly strikes Gordo down with her scythe. As he falls, she casually wonders if he knew anything useful about Zed, showing her single-minded focus on her goal. The battle concludes with a decisive victory for the kingdom's army. Olivia single-handedly disrupts the Crimson Knight's formation, but she is later seen lamenting that she killed Captain Gordo instead of taking him alive, likely realizing she lost a potential source of information. Later, at a training facility in the walled city of Mermaid, Jer is seen practicing intensely. When Ashton approaches, Jer explains that his encounter with the Crimson Knights made him realize he needs to be much stronger to fight alongside Captain Olivia. He feels a vast disparity in power between himself and Olivia, comparing them to ants and beasts. Ashton attempts to comfort him by saying swordsmanship isn't just about raw strength, but this only irritates Jer, who yells at Ashton for treating him like he needs pity. The narrative continues in the training facility, where Jer is venting his frustrations to Ashton. Feeling inadequate compared to Olivia's monstrous strength, Jer argues that his own power is negligible. He insists that Ashton is the true indispensable member of the regiment as its brain. He tells Ashton that while his own death would be inconsequential, losing Ashton would be a major loss that they cannot afford. He reveals that the true reason they must protect Ashton is to prevent Captain Olivia from grieving, noting that she is almost always smiling unless she is deprived of sweets like cake or cookies. He calls Ashton an idiot for not realizing how much his well-being affects Olivia's mood. Suddenly, Olivia appears at the door, having arrived just in time to hear the commotion. Flustered, Jer tries to play it off, claiming he would have rushed to her instantly if she had called. Olivia, cheerful as ever, ignores the tension and immediately asks about vampire birds in the area, lamenting that she hasn't had that tender meat in ages. Jer realizes she is consulting her War Maiden Handbook, a meticulously researched book of her favorite foods. Eager to please his captain, he checks the book, updates it with her craving for vampire bird meat, and informs her of reports regarding emerald hunters on the west side of Metibona, setting their next course of action. The story continues with Olivia expressing a sudden craving to hunt vampire birds near Fort Lambert. She recalls that Jaras, referred to as Jair in the text, is a former hunter and is skilled at plucking feathers, making him the perfect guide for the task. Jer explains the terrifying nature of the vampire bird to a horrified Ashton. He describes it as a Class 2 dangerous creature known as the ruler of the skies. It has glossy black feathers, blood-red eyes, and a hard, sharp-lipped beak. Once it locates prey, it swoops down in a rotating motion and sucks their blood, which is how it got its name. Despite the danger, Jer is enthusiastic about the hunt, having previously mentioned his love for the bird's tender meat. However, his enthusiasm is mixed with concern for Olivia. He insists that he cannot let her go there alone, declaring that he will stop her if she tries to face such a dangerous creature by herself, regardless of her strength. Ashton is terrified and reluctant to go, but Jer is determined to accompany the captain to ensure the hunt is done properly and safely. The scene ends with the group preparing to head out, with Olivia cheerful and Jer resolute. The story jumps forward to the aftermath of the hunt. Jer is shown ecstatically devouring the cooked vampire bird meat, declaring it the most delicious thing he has ever eaten and thanking Captain Olivia for the meal. The rest of the soldiers are also shown happily feasting. While Jer is celebrating, Olivia asks, "What's wrong, guys?" The camera pans to Claudia and Ashton, who are slumped over with dark circles under their eyes, looking completely exhausted and sick. It is implied that they have gorged themselves on the meat and are now suffering from overeating, unable to eat another bite. Everything has reached a whole new level, and things are only going to get more intense from here. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. And don't forget, if you want part, write the word spider in comments, because the story is far from over and the real chaos is just getting started. See you in the next chapter.